and has been just such a force in archery for many, many years. So it's going to be nice to see what we get out of the wild guys. Let's go over to the women's compound scores now, because I know right there we're seeing Emily McCarthy shooting, who's just an absolute standout in a total class act. She's one of the nicest people you can meet on the line. Sarah Priels, of course, also shooting. You know, after the first 60 arrows this morning, Cara Kelly taking the lead with a 10.8 average and a 648. Notable because Cara just switched bow companies. She announced just this week that she, had decided mutually to part ways with Elite, that they had been a wonderful company for her. They had made many great memories together, that she was looking forward to shooting a Matthews, and that she was looking forward to breaking that new bow in here this weekend. Well, it seems like she did that pretty decisively. She's leading the board. Tanja Jensen right behind her from Denmark with a 10.6 after 60 arrows and a 636. Christine Harrelson, nice to see her up on the board. Christine from North Carolina, just one of the nicest people you can meet here in archery, of course, representing PSE, 10.52 after 60 arrows and a 631. And then as we go down and we look at who's starting right now, we've got a lot of ladies who have yet to qualify. It looks like we have Danielle Reynolds, who in the second position, she shot a 646. Sarah Sonicson with a 644, and Sam Brenzel, who is actually going to be part of the world's cutest ever gender reveal this weekend at the tournament.
Oh, that's right.
So Samantha and Kyle Brenzel, of course, they are expecting, and so they are working on a gender reveal, and the winner of that is going to win a new bow, either in pink or blue. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we've got Sharon Wallace and Tanja Jensen, who we just mentioned. So it looks like the scores I was looking at were a little out of date, but Greg saved me over here. Christine Harrelson is actually in 10th, Sophia Strahan in 11th, and Toya Ellison in 12th. So we get a lot of good names up on that board, but interesting to see Danielle Reynolds for sure in second place. It looks like she's shooting extremely well.
So we have some big names from the pro women's side that are on the line right now. Christy Collin is one notable. Cassidy Cox, who shoots for the USA team, and Paige Gore. Now, Paige and her husband are an extreme case.
Yes.
I was just down there before we came back on, and I just happened to poke my head into those two just after the first scoring end. I said, anything you want me to say on the broadcast? They say, yeah, we are very competitive, and they're shooting, I think, one bale apart or two bales apart, and they keep an eye on each other's score because Paige and her husband, they just want to beat each other. Like that's like the first priority. I'm like, What about the tournament? She goes, no, I just need to beat him. I need to beat him.
And I have known Paige for quite some time. I remember when she was shooting, as a teenager, right? Like I can remember Paige when she was really young, and she's always been an incredibly talented shooter, but not only is she incredibly talented, she's really, really nice. Mm-hmm. She is just one of the sweetest people out there. Yep. She is always ready to lend a hand to someone. I know that if I had a question about compound shooting tomorrow, I could reach out to Paige and she would give me an answer and be very sweet and kind about it, and you'd never know that she's a world-class competitor, but she is. She has been a World Cup medalist. She has been on World Championships teams. She has shot in the 3D circuit. She has distinguished herself at NFAA and here at the Lancaster Classic. She is just all around one of the most solid shooters out there. One of the things about Paige that people may not realize, and it does distinguish her a tiny bit, but actually, I take it back. Before we talk about Paige and her equipment, which I want to get back to in a minute, PJ has a multi-time Olympian, Crispin Duenas from Canada, and we're going to send it over to PJ to say hi to Crispin.
Yes, Teresa, thank you very much. Yes, we're here with Crispin Duenas. Crispin, first off, tell us how today went for you.
Today was up and down for me. I think I executed some really good shots. I got lucky with a lot of shots. Right now I'm in third behind Brady and Jack Williams. So Jack's been shooting really, really well, and I got to give him really good props because he's been shooting really well, and to come out here and do as well as he did was phenomenal.
Now, Crispin, for those of you who don't know it, Crispin has a history of doing really well at the Classic. I think second last year, and you've won this a couple times.
Yeah, I won this in 2014 and 2015, I believe. And I was second last year and fourth the year before last year. So we'll see what this year brings.
So from your perspective, now you're used to the match, the elimination stuff. You shoot a lot of that. But the Classic, is that a different format? Is it more of the same? What's your mindset for that?
This tournament, I think, makes me really realize how important hitting X's is, because that can really make or break your ranking round, which can seed you better in the shoot-ups. Because, I mean, if you rank second, the worst you can do is third. If you rank first, the worst you can do is second, and so on. So I think it puts a little bit more emphasis in my practice on how many X's can I really hit versus how many 10s am I just coming away with. So to be able to shoot a 299 in practice is okay, but 299 with 20 X's or 15 X's, it actually makes a difference here. So my mindset in here sometimes can be a little bit too focused on aiming, which can result in some shots that aren't actually that good. So I need to be able to put that focus kind of aside and execute the shot that I need to do, and those shots will end up in the X.
And I believe, Crispin, you're one of the recurve archers who sticks with X10s. You don't switch back and forth, correct?
I can't say that for this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually switched to X23s. I'm shooting 2312 spine right now. I just did a little bit of playing around this year. I said, you know what? Last year I lost to Brady in the shoot-up. So close with the skinny arrows, and we tied in raw score. He just beat me in X's. And then when we went to Vegas, over a 3-day period, I was shooting skinny arrows, Brady was shooting fat arrows, and he got me by 1 point. And that 1 point cost me $8,000 in winnings. So I said, you know what, I might as well give it what I can do and see what I can do with this. And luckily enough, with my poundage, I can shoot a 2312 with a 100 grain point, and it doesn't have to be a special 300 or 250 grain point, and it can still come out of my fingers relatively the same as an X10 with the same speed and the same kick, but now I'm getting away with a little bit more line cutting.
We were talking to Mackenzie earlier, and she was telling us about that you can really feel the difference between two different arrows more so than maybe a compound archer can, which then affects you as the archer.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true, because when the string leaves your fingers, based on the speed that it leaves your fingers will dictate how that shot went. So with an X10, we've been honed into that quick release. But once you put a little bit of a heavier arrow on that, that changes the speed that your string comes out of your fingers, and then that makes you start to think about the shot. And sometimes you have to be able to just say, no, that's the shot, and allow it to go and to just shoot a 10 for you. But you have to wrap your mind back around that fact that you are shooting a little bit of a slower arrow, and because it's slower, you need to have that much more clean of a shot to be able to make that arrow go. Because if you don't, and you start off with a weaker shot, then that arrow can hit, with the lack of a better description, almost anywhere. So you need to have that ability to make that shot absolutely consistent.
Great. That's some great insight on how recurves manage the Classic. Crispin Duenas, we're going to be looking for him tomorrow in eliminations. Back to you, Teresa.
Thanks, PJ, and thanks, Crispin. You know, Crispin just made a great point about how quickly the arrows get out of the bow, and so we've been talking a lot on and off today in our interviews about what arrows people are shooting, and you hear people say, I'm running 23s, or I'm running an X10, and the reason that somebody is choosing that, so when we talk about an X10, we're actually talking about an Easton arrow shaft. It's an aluminum and carbon. It's a composite arrow, so basically there's aluminum and carbon on that arrow. It's a skinny arrow. I mean, you most commonly see it used outdoors, most commonly used by Olympic recurve archers outside. And many archers choose to keep that same setup outdoors to indoors.
Mm-hmm.
But what Crispin said was that he had lost $8,000 because he did not switch to aluminum arrows.
Yeah, that was just the one tournament.
One tournament. So he shot 1 point under Brady over 3 days of competition, and it cost him $8,000. So if you think about that, when we say that you shoot a fatter arrow, we're typically talking about an aluminum shaft indoors, although sometimes we're talking about a fat carbon shaft. But for recurves, most typically we're talking about an aluminum arrow. And so Crispin said at the weight he shoots, he was able to get the right arrow to tune. Now, I think this is the important takeaway for the folks at home, is that if you're listening to this saying, wow, Crispin Duenas got himself $8 grand by shooting fat arrows. Okay, yes, but the important thing is that Crispin probably put weeks and even maybe months into getting the exact right setup. He made it a point to say, I shoot enough weight that this tuned properly for my bow. Because what we do see, unfortunately, or sometimes a lot of folks that don't go to their local pro shop, they buy some arrows from an Amazon or someplace else, or an eBay, and then they come home and they get those arrows set up on their bow, and guess what? Their bow is not shooting well. They're not getting the results they want. So it really underscores the importance of going to your local pro shop to get set up, get arrows that tune for your bow, and try to get the most out of your equipment that way.
Right, because an arrow matched to your bow is a critical component. It's archery. It's what you're doing. A good look at Rio Wild, multi-time world champion, with his very unique style. He has that kind of laid-back style where he has a little bit of a setback. And in talking to Rio about that particular shooting style, a lot of times you'll see coaches that want their athletes to go straight up and down and have a straight spine. But Rio leans back a little bit, and it's something that he picked up from snipers, from talking to some rifle snipers, military snipers, and how they stabilize their body. And archery is the perfect example of there's no one way to do everything. It's unique to you. So it works for Rio as long as he can do it consistently and feel comfortable with it. That's the style that he likes to use.
And right now we see Christy Collins shooting, and
Shane Wills
think
right behind.
next door. I was just going to say, I thought that was Shane Wills.
Yep.
So, Christy is one of the best archers out there. She is just a consummate pro. She's been shooting since she was a kid. She came up in the Junior Olympic Archery Development, or JOAD program. She originally, I think, started shooting up in Maine. She now lives in Pennsylvania with her husband, Terry Collin, who is also a top shooter, and they truly have an archery family. Christy put the most wonderful post up on Facebook the other day, and folks, if you are connected with Christy on Facebook, I know a lot of this post got a lot of sharing within the archery community, but the upshot of it was that she was talking about the journey in archery, and that the journey, if you just continue to put in your time, you will look up and realize that the hours spent, the arrows shot, that it's worth it, that over time you do improve, and you've got to kind of keep the faith a little bit. She said it far more eloquently than what I put it, and I don't think I've ever seen a post by a shooter get as much sharing as that post did. They were words of wisdom, and it was a really cool thing to read.
And great words, because, I've been shooting now, Teresa, for 3 years, and what I've found in my, I'm not a full-time archer. I have a job of sorts that allows me to shoot in chunks, meaning I can spend a couple of weeks, put a lot of arrows in, but then I'm on the road for some weeks at a time and have to put the bow down. What I've found for myself is, in my improvement, is that you can get to the point where you kind of plateau a little bit, and then there's something that clicks, either some advice from a coach or another shooter, and you give it a try and you work on it a little bit, and then all of a sudden, boom, your scores improve by 2 points, by 3 points, by 5 points. And so it's one of the rewarding things as you continue to, if you have that self-drive and you have that desire to continuously improve yourself as an athlete, as an archer. When you first start in archery, you might hit the 10 a couple times. It's a good trick. It's a good trick that shop owners like to use. Put a balloon up, hit the balloon. It gives you that rush of dopamine. It gains confidence. It's all those things that you really want from archery. But as you start to step up the levels, it does take a commitment. There are plenty of people that are very talented behind the peep sight or behind the string. But when you want to get to the level that some of these archers that we're talking about, there's no choice. You've got to put the time in, and you've got to really train your brain to do the right things.
I'm gonna just hope that Christy forgives me, and I'm gonna read from her post because I think it's such important advice for archers to have. So she wrote, I've been doing this for what seems like not that long. It's flown by, and I remember my JOAD days, which is youth archery, of course, like it was yesterday. But I think I've been doing this forever, too. Bows change, arrows change, technology changes, and I change. I often judge practice and tournaments by my score, by what arrows I've missed. But I have started counting my good moments, my X counts, instead of 9 shots, and the fun I've had while doing it. Each day, big or small, adds something to your game and teaches you something new about yourself. Sometimes what used to work isn't what works now, and sometimes what used to work is exactly what you need to go back to. give yourself credit for the positive parts of your shooting, people. There's Christy right now. So dwelling on the negative, she says, doesn't always teach you what you need to know about your shooting. Make calculated changes and don't let one bad day define your season. Most of all, enjoy your time behind your bow and the special people you get to stand next to, because that is what it's all about. And while you enjoy all of that, you just might find yourself on the podium, and that is a bonus. I could never have said that any better than Christy said it. You know, that was a perfect post. She put that, shared that via Instagram and Facebook last week, and she is so eloquent in expressing herself. She's an absolute class act out there, and there's a reason she's been a force in archery for so long. She's taken time off to have she has two beautiful sons, she and Terry. She's taken time off to have 2 kids, and look at her. She is as strong as she's ever been, and she is absolutely a testament to women's compound archery in the United States.
Wow, that was fantastic. So Christy Collin in the middle part of your screen, pulling her arrows out of the target now, as we are going to get set for another end at the Lancaster Archery Classic 2018. And we're hanging out in the Spooky Nook Sports Complex, having a great time, as this is the final round of qualifications for today. As tomorrow we head into the elimination rounds.
Yes, and we are super excited for that because, of course, that's head-to-head competition. We call it an elimination round. I think we mentioned this earlier, but the reason it's called eliminations is if you lose a match, you're out.
Yeah.
You get one shot, and you better make those arrows count, because if you are feeling a little sleepy, if you're a little slow, if you haven't had your, if you haven't eaten your Wheaties, I don't even know, are Wheaties still a thing, Greg? We might be dating ourselves.
No, Wheaties are a thing.
They are a
oh,
thing?
absolutely.
Okay.
And they're still putting top athletes on the boxes.
Well, see, we need to get an archer on that Wheaties box. Where can we sign up Brady Ellison or Christy Collin or Mackenzie Brown?
You know how that goes.
Yeah.
Gold medal.
Gold medal.
Gold medal Tokyo, you're going on the box.
I think that's what we got to do. We got to get an archer on that box. Maybe Crystal or Casey. Can we talk about Casey? I got to say it because I'm hashtag Team Casey.
Okay,
all
hashtag
the
Team
way.
Casey. All right.
Because if that 13-year-old kid today manages to make the Olympic team for Tokyo, I think she deserves to make it onto the Wheaties box.
For those that are just tuning in, why don't you refresh who
Yeah,
you're talking about?
let me tell you. So I have been fangirling over Casey Kaufhold since I commentated at this tournament last year. She has the most amazing potential. So Casey Kaufhold is the daughter of Robin Carroll Kaufhold, sister to Connor Kaufhold, who's no slouch himself. He's also a recurve competitor. This brother-sister team has been totally fierce on the archery field for a couple of years now, and Casey has just really caught fire. She, I believe, hit 7 new national records in her national competitive career. She made the World Championship team last year. She has just dominated, absolutely dominated, first the Bowman division, then spent a very brief time. She jumped straight from the Bowman division, which is basically the under 12s, to the cadet division, which is the 15 to 17s. P.S. She's still only 13 years old, and this year has jumped up to the adult women's division, which is incredible. And the last time that we saw an archer do this and really shake things up in the adult women's division, Denise Parker, who was a 1988 bronze medalist at the Olympic Games when she was only, I think, 15 years old.
Wow.
Casey is potentially, I mean, that's a lofty goal, man, but Casey's potentially poised to do that and then some. And she is just, when you see her interview, and folks at home, if you're watching this, go back and watch her interview from this morning. She is absolutely so full of joy and passion when she talks about archery. She smiles, she's laughing. There is nobody pushing this kid to shoot. She loves doing it, and she's going to be very tough to beat. So anyway, when I talk about the Wheaties box, if I had one pick from the women's recurve division, with lots of love to the other girls in that division who I've shot with and adore, and they're all friends of mine.
Yeah.
If that young girl makes that Olympic team, she deserves her own Wheaties box. So
There
here
you
we've
go.
got Nathan Brooks and Danny McCarthy shooting right now.
Oh, yeah. Danny McCarthy, of course, makes his living and loves the 3D scene.
Yes, husband of Emily McCarthy, who we saw shooting earlier. And Dan, last year, we get to see him, of course, in the final shoot down, and just very steady. He's got a long hold time, but his shots tend to break very consistently. He's a very, very steady shooter.
I'd like to go back and touch on the arrow conversation that we had. For those out there that are wondering about the arrow thickness that we've talked about, you heard Crispin Duenas talk about his arrow selection in terms of his indoor game, going from the X10, which is oftentimes dubbed a micro arrow, versus some of the thicker arrows. Here at the Lancaster Archery Classic, the maximum diameter arrow that can be shot is often termed as a 27 or a 2712. That's 10.7 millimeters or 0.422 inches in diameter. And they're big fat arrows. I mean, basically we talk about big fat arrows. Now, there's always a trade-off in one way or another. So when you're talking about the indoor game, it's important to recognize that we don't have to deal with the elements like we do in the outdoors. So there's no wind blowing here. It's a constant temperature, usually a controlled humidity as well. So we're not really concerned with the speed of the arrow. We're outdoor, we want an arrow that's going to travel fast, have a big punch, because you're trying to get through the wind oftentimes. Not to mention that on the compound side, you're going 50 meters. On the recurve archery side, you're going 70 meters.
Yes.
So speed doesn't become an issue when you're indoor. What becomes an issue is what arrow can I get to cut a line? And when we talk about line cutting, Teresa, what are we talking about?
So we are literally talking about arrows that land just out of or just touching the line for the next scoring ring. So let's say, for example, that you land in the gold, and so your arrow is on the line. It's on that, maybe that in 9 ring territory, but it's just next to the 10 ring. The question is, does that arrow actually break that line? Does it actually touch or bend that line? Or is it just out? And so if you're shooting a really small diameter arrow, and this is for sure a thing when you're talking.
It's a thing.
It's a thing especially when you're talking about heavier poundage and longer draw lengths. It's not as much of a thing when you're talking about shorter draw lengths and lighter weight, because the net gain, let's say going from an AC, an X10 1000. If I use myself as an example, going from an X10 1000 to a 1714 is not gaining me a lot in terms of millimeters. It gains me a little something, but not enough to make a big difference. And so for me, as Crispin mentioned, those aluminum arrows get out of the bow slow enough. If I'm shooting, I shoot lightweight, so if I'm shooting 32 pounds, and I can tell that aluminum arrow with a fairly heavy point is getting out of the bow a little slow, I don't like that. It tends to cause me to over-aim a little more than I should, and it can mess up my shot. Whereas with the X10, it's going to get out of the bow really fast, and it causes me to execute my shot the same way I would as if my target were 70 meters away. Now, the opposite side of that is if I were shooting, let's say, 40 pounds, and I had a little bit of a longer draw length, well, now all of a sudden I'm in business with, maybe a 21 or a 22 diameter arrow. I mean, my point is, or a 20. Like I'm into a stiffer arrow with heavy points. I can make a stiffer arrow work. Well, now there's a big gain in the diameter of that arrow versus a skinny X10. And now it's possible that I may catch more lines, meaning that arrow that would have been just out now might be just in. And as Crispin said, one arrow, 1 point, cost him $8,000 last year. And that's a big deal.
And when you're down at the bales like the archers are heading to right now, that arrow touching that line is a big deal.
Huge.
Now, the way that it works here at the Lancaster Archery Classic is you have one person, so 4 people for bale normally, no less than 3 per bale. You'll have one person who will have a tablet and keep the electronic scoring. Another person will actually have the pieces of paper and write down the scoring. And then you're going to have someone who calls the arrows, and then you have a lucky 4th person who usually hangs out.
Yes.
So when the person who's calling those arrows, if it's a judgment call, if it's kind of on the line, but maybe you see a little bit of yellow because it's the rule of, if the paper kind of bends, but it's the idea of where the line is, you will consult the other people on the bale.
Yes.
And if there's a consensus that this arrow is a 10 or this arrow is an 11, if there's a consensus, then the bale goes with it. If the bale is split, or if the person who actually has that, who shot that arrow wants to contest it, Well, then we have judges that are all across the floor, and simply what you do is you raise your hand, and the judge will come over, and after all the arrows have been scored, you would say to the judge, on this particular arrow, you know, say David Carroll, who we're looking at on the top arrow, we're not sure if that's an 8 or if that's a 9. Could you look at it, judge? And they'll peer at it with a light, with a magnifying glass, and then their decision is final.
And one of that actually raises a great point, Greg, because oftentimes, especially with newer archers, they are afraid to speak up if the other folks on their target think that something is not, a call is not correct, right? So we actually had this situation last year. I was shooting with some wonderful gentlemen, and I had an arrow that I really felt strongly was in. The rest of the group felt the arrow was out, and I asked for a call. And the call went in my favor, and of course, listen, I am not worried about 1 point. I mean, it did not do much for me. I'm not shooting high-level scores here, but I think it does underscore the point that, no pun intended, but when you're sure that, or you think that your arrow really is in or out, for that matter, when you really feel differently about a call, ask the judge. That's what they're there for.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think in archery sometimes too, and this is a great opportunity, by the way, to give some props to our judges, our tournament officials who are working. If you see those folks in the referee style striped shirts, and I actually just saw that we were seeing the Wild brothers there together, part of the Wild pack, the Wild bunch. But if you see these folks in the referee style black and white striped shirts, you know, at USA Archery tournaments, they're in red shirts. It just depends on the tournament you're at. But here they're in black and white, similar to NFAA. These are your referees. These are your judges. And guess what, folks? Your judge is here to help you have a great tournament experience. Their job is to enforce the rules, explain the rules when needed, or clarify a rule, and make sure that things run smoothly. And one of the pieces of feedback that I love so much about this tournament, we consistently hear year after year, is this is one of the most professionally run and managed tournaments, and it's why folks like Chance Bobeff and you see the high five between Levi Morgan and Rio Wild there. It's why these folks come back year after year after year. They're having a great event. And by the way, that gentleman there hugging that other archer, you see his face peeking out. I want to introduce him. I don't know that he'll ever hear me say this, but that is Pee-wee. And Pee-wee has been a mainstay in archery for many years. Pee-wee is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's a New York City police officer. And Pee-wee has worked security as a volunteer at the Olympics many times. He has been a mainstay in target archery. I do not remember the name of the club that he's with, but he is infamous for his purple shirts that he wears to tournaments. He is an outstanding guy. He's a wonderful archer, but just one of the kindest, nicest people you will ever meet on the archery field. And Pee-wee's been around for a long time, and just want to give him a shout out. He certainly has always given me a very warm welcome since the very first time I met him.
And this gives you a good idea of what happens too between ends, you know, where again, if you're looking at the archers to the left, you have Chance Bobeff there in the elite shirt, and who was teammates last year with Levi Morgan on the Matthews squad, and then you have Rio Wild right there. Those are three archers. Chance and Levi see each other all the time because they're bombing around on the 3D circuit.
Sure.
Rio's doing, you know, world competitions. He's doing USAC qualifiers. So this is one of those tournaments, just a couple a year, where you're going to see this group of people come together, and it's an opportunity for them to kind of, you know, talk about what's been going on in the archery world and how things are going for them, and to catch up on how families are doing. And
yes,
you know, Levi is really on fire right now in the archery world, creating new businesses, and he's very active on social media, letting people know what's going on, TV show.
And of course, he and his wife Samantha developed the OPA, which I think is Organization of Professional Archers.
Yeah.
They have a wonderful tournament each year, which has, you know, just gotten incredible acclaim from folks. They've been really impressed with that tournament. So it's been really nice to see what they're doing to raise the level of professional archery and promote the sport. Levi, of course, and Samantha, very, very accomplished archer. She's very accomplished in her own right. Also, she's an incredibly accomplished bow hunter, and it's really nice to see what they've been doing to raise awareness not only of tournament and target archery, 3D archery, but also of bow hunting.
A perfect segue into another class that we have here at the Lancaster Archery Classic. It is the bow hunter class.
Yes.
Now, Teresa, what defines the bow hunter class from the other classes?
So if I'm not mistaken, if it's the same at this tournament that it is at the other tournaments, it's the fixed pin sight that is really going to make the difference. So, and let's explain what we mean by that. So many of the archers that you're looking at right now, they have a movable sight. That means that the scope, if they're a compound archer, they can move that scope up and down, and that scope, that lens has magnification. But in the Bowhunter division, you have a fixed pin sight, which means that your sight pin does not move. So you are essentially moving you have to sight that pin in ahead of time for the correct distance that you are shooting, and then you cannot move your sight. You cannot adjust or compensate during the competition. Likewise, you are not going to have any magnification in your scope. So in this sense, it reminds me just a little bit of the Olympic recurve division, only in the sense that, there's no magnification. And that magnification makes a big difference. I could share a tiny bit of perspective on this. So many years ago, I shot compound. I shot a little 3D, a little field here and there. And I shot with a scope, as many people do, and I was never particularly good with it. Switched to recurve in 2007 and shot the recurve for many years, and absolutely am crazy about it. And then a few years ago, I was, through my work with the Archery Trade Association, I was given the opportunity to try bow hunting. And this was an organization that at the time was very committed to all of their staff trying bow hunting at least once, so they would know and understand what our industry was doing every day. And so I went hunting on a few different occasions and found that I shot much better with a compound bow without the magnified lens.
Interesting.
It was a really big game changer for me, and to this day I couldn't tell you why. I honestly shoot, when I occasionally do pick up a compound bow, I find that I shoot very well with little or no magnification. I don't think I'd do it at 50 meters. I've never been an outdoor compound shooter, but just playing around indoors shooting a league. And so that Bowhunter division, though, is a tough one to do well in, and
it is a tough one, yeah. And in addition to what you're saying, also they have shorter stabilization. So there's a limit on that stabilization. And when we talk about that, that's a long rod. You can see right in the middle part of your screen, the archer there has that rod that's going to the ground. They're going to pull it up, and there's weights on the end of that. And that's exactly, the function is exactly what it sounds like. It's a stabilizer. It's for stabilization. It's also for some damping and vibration after the fact. But just to give you an idea, leading the Bowhunter class currently, from 8 a.m. this morning is Adam Baker, and Adam, he shot 643 out of a possible 660. Eric Griggs is in second place. He shot a 640, so 3 points down. So in the Bowhunter class, what you see is a bit of a separation in score, and I think, from a compound standpoint, indoor, especially at 20 yards, having a 4-power lens, some archers even choosing a 6-power lens, helps to bring that target closer. Now, for myself, I'm a little bit older. I shake a little bit more than some of these younger archers.
Yeah.
I cannot shoot a 6-power lens because when I'm trying to hold the dot, it just moves. And I've gotten used to a 4-power, and that helps me. But so again, it goes back to that personal preference. And I think the other thing of note, which you're talking about, is that on the Olympic recurve side, you have a scope, but no magnification allowed.
Correct. Yep. And so you can move your sight on the Olympic recurve side. You can adjust your sight, but correct, there is no magnification. Now you can have clear glass, so in your aperture. So we don't really call it. You rarely hear us say scope. We're really talking more so about an aperture, but no magnification allowed. That's a strict no-no in Olympic archery. And of course, target archery in the United States follows world archery rules, which follows Olympic competition rules. So when you look at target archers in the U.S., if they're shooting a USA Archery, we've heard people today periodically in interviews refer to the USAT, which is the United States Archery Team or the national team. When they are shooting those style competitions or the national target championships, they are essentially following Olympic rules.
So you could see there just a moment ago, a notable, one of the top archers, number 5 actually ranked compound men's archer in the world, Braden Gillentine, is here shooting this afternoon.
And Braden is just an outstanding shooter. He's also a very nice guy, but he is absolutely just a phenomenal shooter.
Before this scoring end, so they haven't scored just yet, Braden's sitting on a 10.733 arrow average. That's a good way to really kind of benchmark when all the scores aren't in. Can't go on a final score here when they're right in the middle of the ends after they've scored 15. All right, well, let's go ahead over to PJ, who's with
Sarah Lance,
or he will be actually at the end of this end. You with PJ? All right, the end of the end. We're gonna go.
We got ahead of poor PJ.
Yeah, we got ahead of ourselves.
Our bad, PJ.
All right, so back to the scoring idea though. When we're looking at the leading score right now for men's Open Pro is Jesse Broadwater, Mike Schlosser, Chris Perkins. They sit at a 10.983 arrow average, and so this is exactly what we were talking about. If you look at Braden Gillentine, he's at a 10.733 average. So right now he's 0.2 behind on his average. However, because you have 11, he has the ability to bring that average back up, back up closer. So he's missed a couple. So far has Braden in terms of points. He shot 15 arrows, and it looks like if we're taking a look, he's got 11 11s. This is before the scoring end that just happened, and 4 10s, which means he's dropped 1 9 so far.
So let's talk about that 11, because you cannot overstate the importance of the 11 in this competition. I mean, the 11 is the game changer, and that's really what makes this format so much fun. I mean, there's a lot about this tournament that's unusual and unique from the shoot down format, to the way the tournament runs, but this 11, it makes it fun, it makes it challenging. It's a bit of a, but it's really a bit of a game changer, because if you are focused too much on that 11, if you are trying to be a little too precise, you could lose big. You can end up out in the 9 and drop some serious points. And likewise, let's say you're down just a little bit. Let's say that you're struggling a little bit. That 11 gives you an opportunity to maybe make up just a bit of ground as someone else is dropping a point or two, and suddenly the whole thing changes. So that 11 is really going to be the kingmaker this weekend, or queenmaker.
Good point. All right, so but after that scoring end, as we updated our scoring screens, we now have 24 arrows that are scored. Braden Gillentine is slipping down to a 10.708 average. So if we're looking at it, he has 24 arrows. Let me do the math here. He's got 18 11s. He has 5 10s. That's 23. So he has 1 9 so far.
Which is pretty
shocking.
Pretty shocking. I mean,
yeah.
That's big for him.
I got to practice with Braden last week in Nîmes. We were practicing before the tournament, and sometimes an archer shows up and it's the bow that they were at home they're practicing with and everything else. But it was very interesting because he made a comment to me where he said, this bow just doesn't feel like mine right now. And he didn't have the best tournament in Nîmes. And there might be the possibility there's such a short time frame between the two, where I know he went home, got to practice a little bit, but he's still working. He's constantly, is Braden Gillentine, working on the setup of that bow. In terms of, I think the biggest change for him that he often works on is stabilization.
Yes. And Braden, one thing that's great about Braden is he is not afraid to come out and talk to his fans on social media. He's really good about engaging folks and talking about what he's working on, and talking about what's important to him or where his priorities are. It's also nice to see that Braden will periodically also engage people a little bit just in talking about what he's doing in his personal life. He'll talk and oftentimes at tournaments too, we see folks, the teams will do like ice cream bets. They'll do, bets on whether an arrow is in or out, things like that, and really engage the fans. And Braden is one who is super good about that. He posted last weekend, and I want to quote a little bit from it. So on Monday, he said he was on his way home from Nîmes, and that he had a chance to reflect on the weekend. He said, and I quote, "It was a tournament of almost, of chasing back demons, overcoming fear, and of making personal strides. It feels strange to say that despite missing the podium, I feel like I shot really well this weekend. I got beat in the quarterfinals by a teammate, and that was that." But he went back and said, that he had this frustration. He said that he was going to try to start getting some stuff working for this tournament, for the Lancaster Classic this weekend. And so he said it was back to the grind. He landed in Boston at 11 o'clock last Monday night and said that he would be at the range this past Tuesday morning, and that he was focusing on his release timing and shot discipline. His goal for this weekend, Greg, was to have 0 undisciplined shots. He said he may have shot arrows in the past where he needed to let down and didn't, but that was in the past, and that he could and would be more disciplined here.
And that's one of the things that if you need to go find Braden's athlete page on Facebook and follow it, he's so open with what goes on with the mental side of things. And I think it paints a picture. I think oftentimes when you have an elite athlete in a sport, that people think that they have something completely unique, something that they don't have. And there might be times when that's true. I don't think Michael Jordan shares, many great, a lot of greatness with a lot of other athletes, but as does like a Tom Brady. But when it comes to archery, the openness that an archer like Braden Gillentine is willing to share what was going on with him, what the struggles were like, is pretty phenomenal. It kind of shows that they are human beings, and that I think one of the things that's very interesting, Teresa, is that when you talk to these top shooters and you see them come to a tournament, Vegas is a good example, and you have 18 shooters that are making the shoot-off. That means that they've shot 90 arrows in the 10 ring. They didn't miss 1 arrow in the 10 ring.
That's incredible.
Is it like that when they practice? They say, no, absolutely not. It is not like that when they practice. They suffer from the same things that we do, which is a lapse in concentration occasionally, or just a bad shot. And so it's really great and refreshing to see Braden Gillentine and what he does on social media. That really talks about, again, as we look at Braden, glassing, as he likes to call it, making an adjustment on his scope.
Yep.
Something that we don't see very often, but obviously he thinks that there was a great shot that he just had, where it broke, where the shot broke, as they call it, where the dot was and the release went off. I believe this week he's shooting his hinge release. So he's going to let that shot go off.
And that shot looked nice. We'll have to see. His timing looked good. He's got a little bit of a sight adjustment there.
Yep.
We want to see what he's going to do next. But, Braden is one who, his shot timing used to be very, very quick. He was always a very assertive, very aggressive shooter, very, very confident in his shots. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here.
Braden shooting the new Matthews TRX 38. So different from the TRX, which was released last year. Shooting there was a 40 model of the TRX. There were a couple different brace heights, the 7 and the 8. The 7 being a little bit faster, the 8 being a little bit more forgiving. And so with the transition from the TRX, which is a 40-inch axle to axle, to the 38, Braden felt that it gave him a little bit more speed, but it also gave him a better string angle. He liked the string angle a little bit, and that's in relation to where it touches his nose, in relation to where the peep sight and the angle of the peep sight and so on. So much to this archery. I mean, and really, it seems like as you get higher and higher and higher, or you get more experience and you get to become a better shooter, that not only you're fine-tuning the brain, you're fine-tuning the shot process, but also the equipment is the natural follow. And
for sure, Greg, the next step in that is to really have a great relationship with your local pro shop. Whether that's your local shop, if you happen to be here in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area, if they're tech experts, of course, always willing to help and answer great questions. Whether that's your local pro shop down the street, those folks can really help you get dialed in and help you understand which equipment is right for you. I often compare it to hiking equipment, right? Like hiking shoes. If you get into the wrong sized equipment, it's going to be painful and difficult. And I see here we've got PJ ready with Sarah Lance. So we're going to kick it over to PJ to chat with Sarah and see what she's been up to.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Yes, I am here with Sarah Lance. Sarah is a 2-time winner of the Women's Open Pro Division of the Classic. Sarah, which years did you win?
14 and 16, I believe.
How's it going today?
I'm having a little bit of a slow start, but I'm getting there. I'm getting back there.
So if you start out slow, is that just a mental block that you have to fix? What do you do to fix that?
Yeah, it's absolutely mental. I'm a person that when I'm shooting, I get a little hard on myself because I'm not doing as well as I'd like to, and then I just kind of make it worse. So for me, you know, I kind of got to relax and let things go and, you know, just think positively and start talking to myself and talking myself through it, and it usually starts to get better. But
Gotcha. You work it out by the end.
Yep.
So the Classic now, is that a format that suits your skills, or how does that work with you?
Yeah, I would say so. I've always liked the head-to-head stuff. I've always been pretty good at it. I'm a competitive person. I usually get better as I go, so I mean, I've had a pretty good success with this format, but absolutely I would say this is probably one of our toughest, most grueling formats of the year. I would say this, because this is a long round. I mean, this is a long round to be, you know, to try to keep on the top of your game, so, and keep focused, and it's kind of a marathon.
Now, I shot the Classic today for my first time, and it went horribly, but I can't even imagine the pressure on the stage.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very intense, especially being on camera, and you know all your sponsors are watching and everybody's watching. So.
All right, Sarah, we'll let you pull your hours. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Wait, PJ, what class did you shoot in? Because I'm going to look your score up right now. What class? What were you competing in today?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I went under the name Jesse Broadwater.
Oh, you did?
A
Okay.
Men's Open Pro.
You should. Okay, well, let me look that up. Oh, you're leading the way. You want to talk about pressure coming up with the shoot-ups, man. You better be ready for it, PJ.
Bring it, PJ.
I'm ready.
Thank you so much,
PJ.
PJ. Appreciate that. That's funny. Good for him.
Good for him. And that was a great interview with Sarah. PJ, I just got to give a shout out to John Wirt this morning and PJ this afternoon. These guys have been just killing it with interviews and
Absolutely.
keeping our audience at home informed and entertained. And of course, all the athletes here who have such a great sense of humor and willingness to chat with the fans at home. And you know, as in the case of many of these shooters, Mackenzie Brown, Rio Wild, John Demmer, a lot of the people we've been talking to, Casey and Connor Kauffold, willing to share with the audience at home, share their perspective on shooting, share some top pro tips. You cannot get this information anywhere else. So we are just, for everybody who is thinking about, you know, maybe they're a little bit on the fence about whether they're going to stay home and do nothing but watch this tournament all weekend, I highly advise you go to the market tonight. You pick you up some snacks. Snacks.
Good snacks.
Go on like Tasty or BuzzFeed Food
Right.
and get some crazy game day recipes.
Good idea.
And
go get yourself an Apple TV.
Yes.
So you can project your screen right onto your TV.
Call up your archery friends who aren't here at the Classic and have a party. Have like a 2-day party, because we're going to be here all day tomorrow and right through the finals on Sunday. And you know, if you think about it, you got the Classic this weekend. You can practice all your game day recipes for the Super Bowl, and then you got Super Bowl Sunday next weekend with, I mean, I don't want to jinx us or anything,
What?
Greg, but
Yep.
New England Patriots.
What's up?
What's up?
What's up? Go
Fist
Pats.
bump.
Go Pats.
Yeah.
It's true. Teresa and I,
We
you
gotta
know.
be a little careful though. We're like in Eagles territory here.
You are not kidding. Listen, I got off the airplane on Tuesday from Nîmes. I flew from Paris to Philadelphia. I got off that airplane, and you know, international, how you have to see a lot more.
Woo.
I got crushed the whole way because I had to big my Patriots.
That's
you know?
right.
But don't hold it against
Stand
us, folks,
strong.
because at our core, we are archery enthusiasts.
Yeah, we're really just archery enthusiasts, and all we're telling you to do is spend this weekend.
That's right.
You know, it is like you're basically, instead of, I don't even know what show on Netflix that
No.
we're planning to binge this weekend,
No,
but
no,
don't
no.
do
Binge
it.
watch us.
Don't binge watch us. I
Yeah.
mean, this is way better than Game of Thrones. It's way better than The Walking Dead. It's way better than anything else you're going to watch this weekend. Watch archery. It's the real thing.
PJ, what can you add to this conversation?
Well, here I am standing on the finals range. So as you were just talking about, this is what we're going to be looking for tomorrow night and Sunday all day. This is the pressure cooker. They're going to be standing on this 2 stages behind me, 2 archers shooting head to head at those targets. It's going to be dark all around here except for the archers. I can't even imagine how they handle that pressure, but this is where it's going to happen.
Well, we heard from your interview, PJ, earlier with Sarah Sonicson that she's just shaking the whole time. And I mean, you can physically see it in last year's coverage. Oh, there's a photo bomb right there.
Yeah, you always got to have a good photo bomb.
Yeah.
There's always time for that. But yeah, so Sarah Sonicson, She said she's shaking up there, but she won the tournament, so she wasn't shaking too bad.
Yeah, that's a good
very
point.
true.
But you, as Jesse Broadwater, you're going to be shaking right out of your boots. There's no doubt about that.
For sure. There's no doubt about that.
All right, well, thank you, PJ.
You bet.
One of the unique things, Greg, about this finals venue is also the raised platform. So, and you know, last year we were saying that was that was an interesting contrast with Rio 2016. So, if for those of you who watched archery at the Olympics back in Rio, they were shooting on raised platforms as well. And that was something that the team actually specifically trained for ahead of time. And you'd think, well, gee, you know, standing on the ground is standing on the ground, but standing on a raised platform is a little bit different than that. So here in our finals venue, also coupled with that, somebody mentioned it, I think Sarah mentioned it, PJ mentioned it, the lighting. So you're shooting essentially under a spotlight, so the venue is pretty dark. You are lit up and your target is lit up, but there's very much a sense that you're on stage. And then the other piece, which people always talk about, and it actually adds some of the best color to this competition, some of the most fun, are the interviews that you're doing while you're shooting.
Yeah.
So Rob Koffold himself
right in between ends
absolutely interviews the archers as they're going, and it creates first of all, it adds so much to the viewing experience because you get to hear the archer's perspective in a way you'd never hear it otherwise. It's basically one long fan interview for hours and hours. But then you're also it is putting those archers under a really unique level of pressure, and that is unique to this competition. Is, you know, those interviews are as much a part of this competition as the 11, as the shoot down format itself, as the raised platforms and the dark lighting.
Now, the one good thing I will note is that the raised platforms here at the Lancaster Archery Classic is an individual platform. One of the interesting things that happens with raised platforms, and I know this because I was actually at the World Championships, the World Archery World Championships in Mexico City, was that a lot of teams would go to that raised platform that they shot from, but that was one big piece. And so you had, especially the USA team, they would see if the other team walking around would affect, if they could feel it through the floorboards of the raised, because there are some tournaments where they could feel it. And so we talked earlier in the day about, you know, what can you do to affect archers? And if there's the possibility that you could stretch out, maybe move around a little bit and affect the archer at full draw, then would you take that advantage? So one of the things here that's great is, yes, you're on a raised platform. Yes, you have the lights. Yes, you have the extra pressure of the interview. But at least on this platform, you're not being affected by anyone else but your own movements.
I want to point out, hopefully we can keep that camera where it is right now. So that archer whose shirt says Keen on there, so that is Sashiko Keen from Precision Archery. Her coach is Derek Davis in New York. Here we're getting a front view of her. She's coming off the line. Sachi, as she is known, is one of the best compound unit archers in the country. She was an absolute standout as a bowman, and she used to tear up the archery world.
No
I mean,
kidding.
she was like one of those archers that you would look at and say, she is going to light the world on fire as she gets older. And she has just been an absolute standout archer. I understand her younger brother shoots as well. Just the nicest family. You know, she's a really tough kid to beat, and she's very, very determined. And I know she's got a very supportive family as well. I am fortunate to be Facebook friends with her mom. So it's very interesting to see a young lady like that and really see these folks growing up in the sport of archery. I mean, I can remember her competing when she was literally something like 9 or 10 years old, and here she is as a very composed teenager and getting ready to hopefully break into those senior ranks and maybe start making some international teams.
So archers back on the line for another end of competition. If you're new to archery, just happen to stumble across us, an end is basically the amount of arrows that you shoot, and you put those, in this case, 3 arrows, and then you would retrieve them, and that's what an end is. Right,
we go down and they score those arrows, so when you see the archers walking down towards a target each time, they're recording the scoring values of those arrows. And one of the things that's really important in archery, if you're trying to get a good score, the goal must be to maintain consistent process at the shooting line. So the archers are standing on the shooting line right now. They are thinking about how their arms are moving, how their back is moving. They're thinking about their head position. They're doing things step by step with an organized process, whether they shoot a recurve or a compound bow, so that they can have a very disciplined and methodical approach to each shot. As a coach, I often tell my students to shoot as though they are being scored like an Olympic diver. So they shoot like you're being scored on your form, not what's down in the target.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, we're looking at, on the compound side, there's, this is the main hall area where we have all compound competition, or actually single spot competition, I should say. On the other side, we have more recurve, or 3-spot. On the other side, we have single spot competition. But right now, if we're looking at the scores, after 27 arrows scored, so these arrows just shot will be halfway. Chance Bobef actually is leading the way. He's got an 11-point average at 27, so he's what we call clean, and Jacob Pettit as well. So we'll have to see how this end scores. But for this line, which is the Friday 4 p.m. line, Chance Bobef, who we saw just a moment ago on your screen, leads the way with Jacob Pettit. Levi Morgan is in 3rd place. Sebastien Pinault from France is in 4th place. Rio Wild, talked about him quite often, in 5th spot. He's got a 10.889 arrow average. Domagoy Boudin is in the mix with Nathan Brooks, Jesse Starks, Lewis Holmes is there as well. Logan Wild down the list a little bit. Dan McCarthy as well. Tim Gillingham, Shane Wills, just to name a few of the great shooters that we have. As for Braden Gillentine, Braden is now at a 10.741 arrow average, so he's buried down the list a little bit, with still this end to be scored and then another 10 ends or 30 arrows to wrap up our day of qualifying here at the Lancaster Archery Classic for 2018. And Teresa, you know, when we came back up at the beginning of this, you mentioned that we're sitting here in the Trueball Excel Archery Hall, and I think one of the things that's great, and it shows the horsepower that Lancaster as a company has in the archery world, is how many companies have sponsored different parts of this event.
Absolutely.
You have that Trueball Excel Archery Hall that we're sitting in. You have a practice hall, so there's a completely separate area where if you're an archer, you can stay here and you can practice. I mean, there's actually hotel on site, so you don't have to go anywhere for 3 days, kind of like Vegas. But that is the Carbon Express practice hall. We have a variety of different areas as well. There's a Victory Arrow Youth Tournament going on tomorrow. But there's some key sponsors here that really make this all work, including Trueball Excel. You have this video, as you can see, presented by Hoyt. You have live scoring presented by Dead Center Archery Products. Dead Center, of course, stabilization. You have that Carbon Express practice hall, the Victory Arrows Youth Tournament. Plus there's some sponsors, Carbon Express, Matthews, Black Eagle on the platinum level. And then you have a host of different companies here that you know and you use their products. You know, just to give you a few, Carter, SKB cases, a Shrewd, Big Shot, BCY is here, another New England Patriots based fan club.
Great guys there.
Loophole, Doinker, Stan, Scott, CBE, Easton, Limb Savers, Last Chance Archery. There's so many to list here. Incredible tournament, and you can see the presence and you can feel it. That this isn't just about archery. This is about archery, about education. And of course, you know what's funny is I'm staying with a pro shooter. So one of the ways that, you know, you make friends here and you end up scheduling things. We're Airbnb-ing it on this one. You know, $80 a night, split in a couple ways is perfect. But one of the things that we were kind of talking about is your bow case. You know, when you travel with your bow case and you load things up, you know, it's like that mental checklist. Do I forget anything? Is the bow case going to last if I get on an airplane? Is something going to break? This tournament is like the most worry-free tournament ever. Because if anything goes wrong with any of your equipment, you're here at Lancaster. You're here where the industry shops.
This is absolutely true, and I will give you a fantastic example of this. So years ago, you know, as we all know, if you've been watching archery for a few years, USA Archery has combined for the last few years their National Target Championships, which is an adult event, with the Junior Olympic Archery Development, or JOAD National Championships, at the same location. So they've been having these huge events for the last few years, but it wasn't always like that. This year, those events will be separate, and they were separate years ago. They were separate in, I think, 2010. I think 2011 was the first year that they combined those events. And so back when these were separate events, one of the last locations to host the JOAD National Championships independently was Lancaster Archery Supply. And so we, I say we, so in 2008, I think it was, or 2009, it was 2009, we had the JOAD National Championships here in Lancaster, and we had, I was coaching the team from Hall's Arrow at the time, so I came down here with about 25 or 30 kids. We had a wonderful event, but one of my students, who will remain nameless, who I doubt is watching this broadcast, but could be, left his arrows at home.
Oh no.
Drove all the way from Connecticut, 5.5 hours, gets to Pennsylvania, national championships, no arrows.
Ouch.
But here's the teaching moment for all of you back at home. So as a coach, and I think there are a lot of coaches out there that'll agree with me, we really ask our students to keep an equipment journal and a practice journal, right? And that can be recorded in an app on your phone. It can be a paper journal. I really prefer the app so that nothing gets forgotten or lost anywhere, i.e. the arrows. But so we keep an equipment list. And so what happened was, as soon as we would make a change to the equipment, or we'd buy or set up new arrows, we would record all of those specs. And so we were able to get to the JOAD Nationals. Thank goodness for Lancaster Archery Supply being right here. We were able to go to the trailer and say, this is what he's shooting. Can we please have a dozen new arrows made up? And they were able to do it right then.
No
and there.
kidding. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is the arrow. This is the spine that we want. These are the
point
veins that we want.
Absolutely.
The point weight and the length, which is critical for that spine. The spine stiffness that's going to work. Wow.
To work properly.
Yeah.
And his bow had been, of course, like many archers, like many coaches, we would always tune, double check the bow's tune before every national tournament. And so we were really able to pop those arrows on and have them fly just like the old ones did.
Amazing.
And he had a great tournament, but I'll tell you that he never forgot his arrows at home again.
I bet.
So going back, Greg, you made a great point about the packing list. And this is something that, if you're newer to archery or you're not, really encourage a packing list. And you may roll your eyes and you may say, I've been shooting forever, I know my stuff. But even the most experienced archers, if you are rushed, if there's been a change in your flight, or you have to leave for your trip a little earlier, start your drive sooner than you thought, it is too easy to forget something at home. And so I really encourage you to go off a written packing list or something on your phone where you can just check. You can, if you have an iPhone, do it. You can make a checklist, write in notes. It's the easiest thing on earth to do. I'm sure there's an Android equivalent for that. Use Evernote to make a checklist and just run right down that checklist for every tournament. It'll take 2 minutes out of your day, but the peace of mind that you get when you show up to a tournament like this, of course, as you said, that trailer down there, shameless plug for Lancaster Archery Supply.
Yeah.
You have and the shop.
Yeah.
Like
and
what,
the shop,
15 minutes away?
And a shuttle. So like if you literally need to go down there. But yeah, you're right. So right here in the hall is the famous Lancaster Archery trailer, which goes to plenty of 3D events and other events. And whoever manages that trailer,
phenomenal.
I mean, really, there is so much stuff in there.
So cool.
Little bits and pieces, parts and stuff. So for me, what I do is over time, I've come up with a piece of paper that has my checklist on it. I ran down to FedEx Kinko's, laminated it, and then I just take like a whiteboard marker.
So smart.
And so that's all I do is just go check, and then I leave it in the same place at home. And then when I come back for the next trip, I just erase it, just wipe it clean, and start over again.
It's super smart, Greg. I mean, that's a great idea. I'm really,
there it is. There, by the way, there's the trailer.
Yeah, there is the trailer, and that's Connor, by the way. Connor Koffold on the back of the trailer. I know Casey's right next to him. I don't know if we can get a view of the full back of the trailer. Oh, there they are.
Yeah.
And let me tell you about these two. I love the interviews I've done with them, where they have talked about the friendly wagers that they have when they are practicing with each other. It sounds like these two really keep each other going.
Okay, so Teresa, you really bring up a good point that's been kind of rolling through my mind when we talk about training. So one of the themes that we have heard from the massive amounts of interviews that we've gotten today from these top archers is the pressure cooker that is the shoot-ups, and how it works and everything else. What's interesting to me getting into archery, and I've only heard a few coaches actually talk about this. George Ryles is one of them who has his program down near the Atlanta area, is putting your students through the elimination or shoot-off process to give them practice if they ever get into a situation, say USA Archery or World Archery, where they're shooting, that 150 round or even this pressure cooker. And that's something that you can do at home. If you belong to a club or you're shooting, with someone at your local shop, find someone that maybe is close to your level and see if they're competitive and say, listen, let's do some shoot-off formats. It's going to be, whatever the format you want. In this particular case, it'll be 5 ends, 3 arrows, and then put something on the line, whether it's, the ice cream bet or just, whatever. Make it mean something. Because if the one thing that I understand about archery is that when you compete, your nerves are created by you. You're just standing at a line, throwing an arrow 18 meters down the line or 50 meters or 70 meters, whatever the distance is. What creates those nerves is you make it mean something. You create something at stake. Oh, I need to do well at this tournament. Rio's a great example. His nervous arrows are his first. If he can open up good, he gets the confidence, he builds it right away, and then he mows it through. So one of the things that's interesting that a lot of coaches don't think of, or even archers, is that as you're practicing shooting, why not practice putting yourself in a tournament situation? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. So this is something I do very frequently with my students, and we make it a part of their training plan. So, and actually, I'll take it a step further and say there are some kids out there, if you're listening and you live in a rural area or you're not close, you're one of those kids that's shooting remotely from your team, you're a virtual student of a club, and I've certainly had students like that. So a couple things that I recommend. Number one is you can certainly have a Skype practice date with a friend. I have to give a shout out to my very good friend Nikki Haverstock. She was a collegiate archery and tournament archery standout for many years, and a collegiate coach as well. And so she's now living in Colorado. She and her husband are living and working on a cattle ranch. And so Nikki and I check in every week about our goals for archery, about what we are doing, and actually even Skype practicing together if you do not have an archer near you. The other thing I would say is when you need to put yourself under some pressure and you don't have an archer nearby where you can shoot that match against them. So 2 things I love to suggest to my students. The first is Archery TV, which is World Archery's YouTube channel, is one of your best resources. So pick a match on Archery TV, pick a competitor that would be in your division, and shoot on their opponent's timing. And so now you've got a competitor, and you're facing a competitor like Aida Roman or Gabriela Bayardo or Mackenzie Brown. Those are all options for you. The other thing too is you mentioned reward, and reward is really important. So if you're practicing on your own, you don't have that teammate to wager with, what you can do is determine what your goal is for the week in terms of practice and pressure, and then if you meet that goal, determine what your reward is. So if you're an adult archer, for myself, maybe it's rewarding myself with a pedicure at the end of the week, right? But if you're a kid or if your money is super tight, you're just trying to be conservative because you're saving your money to spend at Lancaster Archery Supply or going to tournaments, then you may just do something like you may reward yourself with a candy bar, and that reward really depends on how hard the goal is. So, for me, when the goal is a tough one, I'm going to be really, a little more generous with myself.
I'm going to take it a step further.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so 2 things that I've done recently that I've found that very interesting, and that is shooting in front of the public. And how you do that is this. One is myself and a shooter who shoots for Prime and Shrewd, Caleb Sorrells, is we did a Snapchat battle.
Oh, nice.
So what we did is I was in Illinois, and he was in Indiana at the time. And so what we did is we made it public, but basically we Snapchatted each end.
Nice.
And made it public.
Yeah.
And we were going back and forth, and a lot of people latched on and said, wow, that's pretty good. Now, another thing that happened, and this happened just a couple of weeks ago, is that Paul Tedford, who's one of our top shooters in the compound division, as well as a shooter for Prime, he decided that he was going to do a Vegas round live on Facebook.
Nice.
He put the camera, he locked his phone down on the target, and he shot the whole thing live. Took about 30 minutes or so. And I said, ooh, I'm going to give that a try. So when he was done, I texted him and I said, I'm going to give it a go. And I'm a 296, 297 type of shooter. Occasionally I can shoot a 300, the 299s kind of thing. And I put that camera on, Teresa, and it freaked me out because you thinking, how many people are watching right now? What if I miss this and what are they going to say? And I shot like a 292 or a 291 in that round.
Absolutely.
When I got finished with that, Paul and I were texting because he's out in Cascade, Montana area, and I said, that was the most incredible sensation I've ever felt shooting a bow. And he said that was so impactful for him. And he said, I'm going to start doing that once a week. And I said, why aren't other pro archers doing that? And he said, because of exactly the reason you were fearful. Because they don't want to show other people that they don't practice perfectly, that they don't want to miss arrows and have people know about it Facebook Live. There's no editing there.
No.
It's just a live stream.
Absolutely.
So it was quite an interesting dynamic, and it's something that I've been shooting consistently, like in the last couple of weeks. So it was like Iowa, and then Nîmes, and then here, and then Illinois State shoot, and then Vegas, and so on. But when I get some breaks and I don't have tournaments to shoot in, I'm going to start doing more of that Facebook Live, because even though there were 300 people that tuned in, it made no difference. I didn't know that pressure was unique, very unique.
Well, it does make a big difference. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. You know, there is everything from, deliberately introducing variables that are going to bother you during tournaments. So if you're shooting in a tournament where they have music playing all the time and music freaks you out, or a certain type of music bothers you, you deliberately play that. I mean, so one of my students, Imogen Grzemski, she shot this morning, and her mom discovered while she was practicing over the holiday season that the Christmas Shoes song bothered her so very much. And let's just say, Greg, I'm with her on this one.
Yeah,
okay?
I'm with her
Every
too,
time I
yeah.
hear that song, I want to just, it makes my teeth hurt.
Exactly.
But anyway.
Makes me want to knock up an arrow and point it towards the radio.
Absolutely. So her mom started playing the song for her while she was shooting. So a lot of times I do encourage, I mean, all joking aside, I will ask my student and say, what's your least favorite kind of music? And then, pull out my iTunes music and just start playing for them. The other thing too is, we look for things that distract you. One of the great stories I heard from an Olympic medalist many years ago was that she would, her goal was to sit in a room while her parents talked about her in front of her, and she had to read a book while her parents talked about her and then repeat what she had just read. And that was a really interesting challenge for her. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that we do this with archers, and it's so individual to the archer, because likewise, I've got kids that don't have a high distraction level. And speaking of distraction levels, one of the better archers that we have here this weekend, she's amazing. She's a force internationally, is Sarah Priels. We're going to go out to PJ now, who's with Sarah, and let's hear what she has to say.
She's doing our commentary in there. Okay, so Teresa and Greg, I am here with Sarah Priels, who is one of our far-traveling archers. And Sarah, where are you coming from today?
Well, I'm coming from Belgium, but living in the UK, studying in Edinburgh.
And how is your round going today? Is this your first time shooting the Classic?
No, it's third time. I made the cut the first year, and then we got snowed in, so didn't make the cut. Right. And last year was poor, so doing it far better this year with 27 X's in the first one. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how does this tournament compare to what you're used to shooting over in Europe? The format, venue, all that kind of thing.
Venue is like bigger. It's just great. Format is like, I'm trying to hit X's all year round, so it doesn't change much. Haven't changed my setup. Still shooting X Busters. It's going quite well.
That's awesome. What bow are you shooting today?
I'm shooting a Matthews TRX-7.
Gotcha. How do you like that? I know a lot of the target archers prefer the 8-inch brace height, but you're taking the 7. Why did you choose that one?
Because I have quite a short draw length. I've been shooting quite short brace height before, so I used to shoot the wake before, so it was 5 inches. So 7 is quite big for me.
That's awesome, Sarah. We wish you good luck the rest of the way. Back to you, Greg and Teresa.
All right, thanks. In the Women's Open Pro Division, Sarah, in this particular qualification here at the starting line at 4 p.m., she does lead the way with a 10.908 arrow average. So far, 33 arrows, she's hit 30 after that last 30 11s.
And she's a tough shot. I mean, she is a really good shooter. She's tough to come up against. We talked to her, I think, a little bit last year, and just so impressed. You know, by the way, she highlighted her experience. So she's from Belgium originally. She's studying in Scotland right now, and I think she said Edinburgh. And, you know, that underscores, I think, a few of us were talking last night about living in Europe when you're an archer, that you have access to international competition. You're close to the UK, you're close to other European countries. You have greater access to more international competitions and other competitors than we do here in the States. You know, I was joking saying, you know, somebody was saying that they leave the Netherlands and by the end of the day they can be in, I can't even remember, they can have gone through like 3 or 4 countries.
Oh yeah, oh no question.
And by the end of my day I can maybe be in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So, so it's very, I'm super envious. As a coach and as an archer, I'm always envious of these folks who get that exposure. So it's a real compliment to us. And it says a lot about the Lancaster Classic that these folks come here for world-class competition when in fact they don't have to go very far at home. But they come here because of the quality of the event and especially because of the quality of the competition.
Now there's a look at barebow competitors, and we touched on this earlier, and we didn't really get into the specifics on what makes a barebow versus another recurve, so have at it.
Yeah, I'd love to. So if you're taking a look at these bows compared to the Olympic recurves that we see on the line, and in fact there's a great contrast right there. So we've got an archer on the far right who you can see the bars that are kind of sticking out of his bow. Those are V bars. There's you know, stabilizers that come off to the side, and then a front stabilizer is that long rod in the front, and of course a sight. But on a barebow setup, there is no sight. There are no stabilizers. There is a riser, which is the center part. You see the limbs there, and then an arrow rest, which is what the arrow rests on, in a plunger to control the flight of the arrow. That's it, folks. It's just a string, a bow, a rest, and a plunger. There is no aiming or stabilization device allowed.
And it's quite challenging. It is quite challenging. And I think the thing that's appealing about barebow, and I know my fiance really, she has an Olympic recurve bow, and now she's shooting barebow, is that you don't have to be as accurate. There's more room to do well, I guess. It's kind of a hard way to explain it. It's like when you shoot pro compound, you have to be perfect. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's only, you know, you have up at the top, there's only 1 point dropped by 3 people so far, and actually in this line, Jacob Pettit is clean so far after 33. So in barebow, it's a variety. It's a variety of scores, you know, because it's such a difficult discipline of archery.
So we always say, you know, we say oftentimes that compound is a game of not missing, and recurve is a game of hitting, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
So you're trying to hit the 10 all the time with a recurve, and you're trying to hit the 10 with, you know, with a barebow setup, and you're trying never to miss with the compound because the level of competition is just that high.
That's my problem, right? Okay.
But I will say, if we take a page from Christy Collins' book, as she put it so eloquently earlier this week, you know, even if you are shooting a compound, think about the X's and the 10s that you are hitting as opposed to what you're missing. And so, you know, as you said very well, and as you mentioned, your fiance shooting barebow, that's really what that's about, is counting your hits and counting the good shots as opposed to counting against yourself, worrying about the points that you drop. And so, you know, the difference now, let's contrast those barebow setups with compound. Now in compound, you've got wheels and cams to conduct the energy of that bow. You've got limbs that are storing far more kinetic energy than a recurve bow. Thus, the arrow is traveling much faster. The bow is just putting much more speed and force through the arrow, so you can shoot a stiffer arrow with a compound bow than you can with a recurve bow, because the bow is breaking down the spine of that arrow and causing it to flex more. And you can almost argue that you can shoot more weight with a compound because your initial draw weight is far more than your holding weight. So because of the principle of let off, as you draw back, the weight of the bow peaks, and then once you are past that peak, You can pull against the wall, which is essentially it's a draw stop. It stops you from pulling any further. And once you're resting back there, you're holding significantly less weight than you actually drew back. Whereas with a recurve or a barebow setup, you are holding 100% or more of the weight that you started to draw, because if you are a taller person with a longer draw length, basically anything over 28 inches, you experience what's called stacking, which means those limbs are pulling exponentially harder once you start pulling past 28 inches.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, so if you're a tall person with a recurve, so, if we use, I'll just pick on my husband because I know his numbers. So,
yeah.
So if you're talking about Butch, for example, now Butch has a 31.5 inch draw. So, his limbs are rated for 28 inches, and that means he might, on a, let's say a 36-pound pair of limbs, he's really pulling like 42 pounds.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's not cranked up.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So for folks who are tall, who are large with a long draw length, that does make a big difference. That's a game changer.
Yeah, because you're going to get, you need the strength, and you definitely need that endurance when you're, especially at a shoot like this where you're shooting these 60 arrows, or outdoors where you're shooting 72. Some rounds
you're shooting 144.
144.
Absolutely.
Gnarly.
So,
I can't even imagine having to pull. I mean, think about it. That's just like bending over and just taking a 44-pound weight and then just pulling it, just lifting it off the ground, holding it for what? What's this whole time? 3 seconds? 5 seconds?
Well, about 3 to 4 seconds, depending on the round that he's shooting. Now, great example. So our last Olympic trials process, our first trials, of course, was an open event held at Texas A&M University. I went and shot the first trials just for fun. The cut is to the top 16 women. I knew I wouldn't be near that, but I wanted the experience of shooting the trials. It is 144 arrows in one day.
Yeah.
And we had weather, so you have a big fat delay sometimes in the middle of that. We had a huge storm. Anybody who shot there is probably rolling their eyes and laughing right now because it was we weren't laughing at the time.
No.
But it is exhausting, and so you train for that, right? You ideally should be able to be strong. If you think about what it takes to shoot 144 arrows, so you've got 3 to 4 ends of practice, because you typically have a 30-minute practice in the morning. You break for lunch. You've got another practice round, and then you're shooting again. So you really have to be strong through just about 200 arrows, which means you've got to be practicing significantly over that to be comfortable there. So that's a heck of a lot of training. Now let's add September Eastern Texas heat to that. And
now you're talking about a marathon.
It really was a marathon, and it's a bit of an endurance test, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, let's not complain here, because you shoot it willingly and you enjoy every minute of it.
I can't imagine the cheer of the crowd when that last arrow was fired. And
Dude.
Dude.
It was like, we were so excited to get off that field, and fun story. So we had, as I mentioned, we had a huge storm that came through that tournament. It was really, really rough. And we saw like the gray clouds kind of billowing across the field at A&M, and so the rain starts, and it's like sideways rain, right? And so the bales start coming down, and they stop us.
Oh yeah, they blew over.
The bales are coming down, so they stop us in the middle of it, and they're like, no, you can't shoot. So we all sit under our tents, and we wait for the rain to stop, and it's like an absolute deluge. Well, we go down to pull and score our arrows. The sun comes out, and immediately the field bakes like within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so we get back there, and I went down to pull arrows, and I'm walking back, and I'm like, something kind of hurts in my shoes, and all of a sudden both my legs start to burn at one time.
Ooh.
Fire ants in my shoes. Fire ants, Greg.
Ouch.
Yeah, so archery is one of the safest sports with an incredibly low injury rate.
True, yeah.
But every once in a while you get something a little weird, and that's why you always bring a change of shoes and socks to an outdoor archery
See, I don't
tournament.
have that on my list.
And we don't have that here at Lancaster Archery Supply. We are at the Lancaster Classic. You have a perfectly, beautifully controlled environment with even lighting. I don't know, Greg, you shot this morning. I shot this last year, but I didn't shoot it today. I found the lighting here was really nice and consistent from target to target and very bright. How did you find the lighting this morning?
Yeah, I found it the same way. The practice area, there's a certain part of the practice area which is brighter. And so if you're smart, you come into this hall, you go into the practice area, and you just try to shoot consistent light. And the reason that's important, especially for compound shooters, is because you have what's called a peep sight on the string that has a little aperture, and you're trying to, I mean, it depends on the archer, but the way I like to shoot mine is I like to have the very outside edge of my scope on the right around the edge of the peep. And what happens is that when there is less light, you actually see more of the scope.
Yep.
So for me, I made the mistake yesterday of practicing in the bright light, and I made minor adjustments to make sure that that peep and that scope were perfect. When I came in this morning to shoot, I pulled the bow back and I saw daylight around the outside edge of the scope. Now for me, it was a simple rail adjustment. I actually pulled the scope in a little bit in order to fill that peep hole. But there was luckily I've tested for that, so I know when I bring my rail, my scope, my whole sight back towards me, I know how many clicks it takes per. So it's about 5 clicks when I bring it back. So I was able to adjust quickly. But once you're set, if you walk up and down this entire shooting lane, it's very, very consistent, and it's very roomy. There's some tournaments you go to where you can show up to a target and you look 18 meters down range or 20 yards down range, and the room gives you this impression. Through your brain, you go, man, that target looks really far away.
Yeah.
And it kind of messes with you a little bit, you know, especially if it's different from your practice range. But the one thing that I picked up from shooting this morning at 8 o'clock was when I got to this hall, it just felt like home. Like it just felt like it was a doable distance. Everything seemed great. The way this tournament's designed as well, with the target faces that you see, those vertical target faces. One of the things I really enjoy about this tournament, and it falls in line with the way Neem was last week in World Archery, is if you're 15B, you stay there the entire time. Speaking about staying there the entire time, PJ is hustling right now, and he has another special guest. PJ, what do you have?
Yes, we got Dan McCarthy standing here. Dan was a fixture last year. He made it into the final shoot-up. Dan, we've been talking about what that finals stage is like, but before we get to that, how's your round going today?
It's going all right. I wish it was going a little better. Little bit of I wouldn't say it's all nerves, but just this is the first day of scoring for me for the year. I feel a little tense. Just trying to work through some of the tight muscles I feel in my form and stuff, and hopefully I can work out some of those bugs before tomorrow.
So now, if you're feeling that kind of thing, what's it like when you're on the final stage?
Honestly, I feel less pressure towards the end of stuff because you've already made it, you know. So I mean, really, like this event, this is just a qualifying, and I'm not saying I'm feeling a lot of pressure. You're nervous. If you're not nervous here, you didn't practice hard enough at home. You've got enough. If you have nothing to lose here, you didn't put enough into it. But I'm just talking about, you feel just a little bit of other tensions where when I'm practicing at home by myself, you can't simulate other people being around. You can't simulate it really meaning something. And so that's the stuff I'm liking to work through today.
So, and now what's it like for you? Emily is shooting right now as well. Do you keep track of what each other's doing? Emily, I should say Emily McCarthy is Dan's wife. Do you keep track of each other, or do you just do your thing and she does her thing?
I do my thing. I mean, when I'm shooting, I'm trying to focus strictly on my own performance, what I have to do to just focus on me. And I trust that she has her game under the same control. I mean, really, if you're out here worrying about more than yourself and your own performance, you've got one too many people on your brain. You're probably not going to do that well.
Greg, you just heard Dan criticize basically everything that I did today when I was on the line, because I did all the stuff he said you shouldn't do.
Yeah, that happens.
Thanks, Dan. You got to pull your arrows. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, PJ.
See you, Dan.
Thanks, PJ.
Back to you guys.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And currently, before they score these arrows at the 4 p.m. line, Dan McCarthy sits 12th with a 10.833 arrow average at the moment. So he is definitely in the mix. Again, they take the top 64
Yes.
into elimination rounds in Dan's class, which of course is the open the men's Open Pro class. So Dan, falls right in line with what we were really talking about just a few minutes ago.
Absolutely. And Dan also alluded to tight muscles and needing to work some of that out. And, that actually brings us to a really important point. So one of the things that you may see when you walk up and down, especially right before shooting starts, is folks stretching out. And, as a coach, one of the things that we talk a lot about is the importance of stretching and conditioning so that you don't injure when you're shooting. Now, as I said before, archery is one of the sports with one of the lowest injury rates out there. People are very safe when they're shooting. They stay very healthy when they're shooting. But that involves a tiny bit of common sense, right? Which is that anytime you're going to undertake any kind of, strenuous physical activity, even something a little strenuous, you should be stretching your muscles out, particularly when you do something that is repetitive motion on one side of the body, as archery is. And so we really encourage folks to think about that before they pick up their bow. Make sure they learn how to stretch properly for archery. Hopefully you're all working with a coach if you're a competitive shooter. If you're not, there are some great resources out there on the internet for stretching. But if you are working with a coach, make sure that you get with her or with him on a good stretching routine. Get yourself a good stretch band. There are a lot of different options out there. There are devices like the Shot Trainer. There are all kinds of, the AccuBow. There are all kinds of different things you can use to stretch out or work those muscles when you're on the road. You alluded, Greg, earlier to your work travel schedule and that sometimes you go through long periods of time where you can't shoot a bow. But there are always solutions to that too. I have, business travel. Last year, the ATA trade show, if for folks out there who are shop owners or business owners, you've been to the ATA trade show, it is just nonstop craziness for a few days. But I brought a bow, a riser, limbs, and a bowstring, and pulled that bow back in the hotel room until I felt like I was having some success. And so up next we've got PJ with Nathan Brooks. He's going to chat with Nathan now. Go ahead, PJ.
Yes, thank you, Teresa and Greg. Nathan Brooks is here. Nathan, you're going to recognize him, of course, from ASA and IBO, primarily being a 3D shooter. Or am I offending you by calling you that? What would you say your primary is?
You can't offend me. No, definitely. I cut my teeth shooting 3D. I didn't start shooting indoor archery till I was probably, 23, something like that, 24 years old. So
last year?
Yeah, last year. About almost 20 years ago now. But we were just talking about this a second ago. Mark Ritchie asked me, do I like indoor better or do I like 3D? And I told him I got to have both. I mean, there's no way I could say I just want to shoot 3D all the time because I'd get tired of that. I like this because it shows you who you are. The paper doesn't lie. And, Mark made the statement of, well, he likes who he is when he shoots 3D because he's so relaxed. And I said, well, that's actually what I like about this is it shows me who I really am. Can I handle this? And, of course, the comment was also made, well, I don't like who I am, apparently, and I don't either. A lot of times I definitely don't like who I am. So,
do you feel the pressure when you're coming out there on qualification, let alone the finals and elimination? Do you feel pressure in a situation like this?
Oh, yeah, definitely I do. And it's crazy that you do, but at the same time, I know it's coming, so I've learned to try and embrace it. I'm not going to say I always win that battle, but I've learned to embrace it, and I try and relate it to other things that I do. And one of the things is hunting. I know that's kind of weird that we throw that in there just because it's archery, but I throw it in there just for the simple fact that I get excited when I'm hunting and the opportunity presents itself. I should do the same thing here. I should look at it as an excitement instead of something that I'm dreading. And it changes your whole mental psyche. And it took me a while to learn that. I had success when I first started shooting indoor right off the bat because I was too dumb, which is wonderful. You don't overthink things. You just go shoot it. It's 20 yards. It's not hard. But the more you think about it and the more people that tell you do good at it, the more you expect out of yourself. So then those expectations grow, and then that's where the little demons start to crawl in, and then it becomes a problem. So
that's awesome, Nathan. Thanks. We always enjoy watching you. Back to you, Greg and Teresa.
All right, thanks.
PJ.
And Nathan currently, for the 4 p.m. line, sits 6th in the running order at a 10.897. average for his arrows after 39 scoring arrows?
You know, it's funny. There are so many folks here this weekend who, you know, I've been seeing for so many years on the tournament circuit. You know, Nathan, of course, you know, from 3D from many, many, many moons ago. Tony Taza, I saw, you know, further down the line earlier today. You know, Dwayne Price, Darren Christianberry, all those folks have been shooting for so many years. Connie Calloway, I think, is here shooting this weekend. She is just an absolute force. Ginger Hopwood, who is now a coach and has been a tremendous shooter for many, many years. We just see so many people who have had these long-standing careers in archery, and that is such a, and in fact, Eric Griggs, too, who is, I think, currently second in the Bowhunter division. He's just launched his new company, which I believe is one of our sponsors this weekend, Gas Bowstrings. These are folks who have been around for a very, very long time, and it's wonderful to see these people who are still invested in the sport of archery now introducing their husbands and their wives and their kids to archery. It's a wonderful thing to see. So I think that says a lot. You know, Nathan mentioned something that was very important, which is that, you know, he needs both. He can't just do indoor. He can't just do 3D. He needs both. And a lot of folks will also tell you that that's because it keeps you engaged year round. You know, Brady Ellison will tell you, of course, Brady is he shot earlier today. He's a very, very accomplished bow hunter, as well as a target archer and previously a 3D archer. And Brady will tell you that, you know, when his target archery season wraps up and he's wiped out by, you know, September, October, he goes and he hunts for a few months. You know, that's what he does to change gears a little bit. So there just are so many good opportunities to participate in this sport in different ways. If you get a little tired, you're tired of shooting targets in across a field at target archery, great, go shoot some 3D. Shoot a field round. I mean, that is some of the most fun you will have outside anytime.
Love field archery.
Butch and I have absolutely enjoyed, you know, we've shot a lot of field rounds, and it's just so much fun. And every year we say this is going to be the year we go to NFAA Outdoor Nationals, and we've yet to do it, but I think this might be the year. I can't encourage anybody enough to go try. If you're a 3D shooter and that's all you do, come out and play at one of the USA Archery events this summer. You know, go, if you are in Utah, go over to Salt Lake during the World Cup in June and watch the best shooters in the world compete, or many of them. You know, we'll never say that they are the best in the world. We know that there are, you know, 3D world champions here who have not competed at those World Cups, and the reality is the best in the world is a very subjective term. But, you know, go watch the Olympic medalists and the world champions do their thing if you're over in Utah. The point is there's so many ways to enjoy archery. And this weekend right here, the Lancaster Classic, this is definitely one of them. It's amazing.
The clock ticking on this A-B round. As you can see, 2 minutes to shoot your 3 arrows, which, you know, when you're faced with the X as an 11, 2 minutes goes a lot faster than when it does than when you're shooting just 10s.
It sure does.
It's so weird that happens.
Yeah, and we were, you know, Chuck and I were chatting about this morning too. Chuck Cooley, of course, my co-commentator earlier today. You know, Chuck and I were saying that when you shoot a tournament, time seems to speed up a little bit. It's a bit of a strange thing. It's almost like sometimes time slows down a little, and sometimes time gets moving a little faster, and it's a bit of a strange thing.
Well, PJ is hustling, and he keeps the gas on, and he is with George Ryles, I believe,
Nice.
PJ?
Absolutely. George Ryles IV, also known as Griv. Every time Griv comes to Lancaster Archery, the archers flock in. And Griv is a shooter, but he's also a coach. Let's start out. How did your day go today shooting?
I had a really good day today. I have been super busy and haven't focused on my practice at all. So my practice has been shooting events. Gotcha. So for a fat guy who doesn't practice, I crushed it today. But, you know, I didn't scare anybody. So
you've given hope to fat guys everywhere, George. We appreciate that.
Thanks, George.
But the coaching that's your main thing, and you've got some kids that were just killing it today. Tell us about them.
Yeah, you know, Matthew Russell, one of the kids in my local program, his light bulb turned on during Christmas camp. And he shot several really great scores during Christmas camp. He's like, oh my God, I don't know how this is happening. I'm like, I told you that just stay the course. It will come. Just stay there. Yeah. And he shot a 329 in his first half today. Wow. And he was just, you know, and at that moment, I didn't even care where my arrows hit, right? It was great. It was great. So I got Blaze is over here, Hannah Moose is over there, Carson Sapp is over there, Gaius, Jessica. I mean, I got the whole crew here, and they're having a blast. They're shooting great, and I am fulfilled.
That's awesome, and we appreciate you bringing your kids to this tournament. Obviously, that's what you're doing. You're training tournament archers. How important is it for them to get out to an event like this?
It's an absolute must. Not only do they have to get out to events of this magnitude, but they also have to get out to many little events nearby so that they can be ready for this one, right? So they have to kind of burn in and get ready with all the little local Thursday night, you know, fun shoots and things. And then we start the course, you know, Midwest Open, Iowa Pro-Am, Lancaster, Neem, you know, and they start the tour. And we got a whole gang, and they take the full thing. And these shoots are important because they're trying to learn to be pros. And this is one of the few places that you can rub elbows with the best, and you can test yourself against the greatest archers in the world, and it's within driving distance. You know, so it's great.
Hey, PJ.
Yeah.
Before
Yes,
you
sir.
let him go, ask
Yes.
him. Could you ask him about how he trains his students for elimination rounds?
Oh,
and
yes.
shoot-offs?
So Greg is asking me, how do you train your kids for elimination rounds and for the shoot-ups?
So we do a special thing during our fun shoots or during our team meetings and things like that. They'll shoot a round for score. I'll quickly rank them out. And then we will do just a flat-footed, really fast head-to-head match against each other. And I'll visually handicap if I have to or something like that to make it real. And then to add the burn, the fire, I put it on Facebook Live. I crank the music and I start shrieking in their ear. I stand in front of them with the phone, you know. I like do the whole thing, and they get used to that environment. And they go to a place like here or another major event, and they're like, I was crazy nervous, but I can handle it. I can do it. You know, it doesn't make the nerves go away. It just makes it manageable, you know. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I do it out loud in public on Facebook so they can deal with that peer pressure, you know, all of that, yeah.
That's great. Hey, we appreciate, again, George, you and your team coming out here. Greg, back to you and Teresa.
All right, thanks so much, PJ and George. Good insight there.
It's great insight. And, you know, it's funny, we were talking earlier about the importance of putting people under pressure when you're practicing. And, you know, we always say that you practice like you compete and you compete like you practice. And everything that George said just totally embodied that. I mean, that was fantastic perspective.
And it's something I'm learning as an archer, only 3 years into it. And really, to be honest, as a former stick and ball athlete, you know, having grown up playing stick and ball sports, playing volleyball in college, and then I used to be a motorcycle racer, one of the characteristics that I always pride myself on is that come game time, I was better. Okay? So I'd practice well, but come game time, I was better. I would in qualifying do well, but I would always go faster in the race. And archery is the only sport that I'm doing where when I get to a tournament, if I'm not shooting my average at home, it drives me bonkers. But more on that later as we get back to PJ, who has Alex Wiffler.
Yes, Greg, thank you very much. I am here with Alex Wiffler. So Alex, of course, you won this in 16? 16. Yep. And of course, he's a 2015 Vegas champ. So Alex is no stranger to this stage. Alex, how was your shoot today?
I had a really good shoot today. I have been working on a lot of my technique and mental game too, and everything just kind of clicked. I had one shot get away from me, but I ended the day with 6 down, so I'm really pleased with that. Yeah.
And Alex, I should mention, shoots in Men's Open Pro, so he's in the bigs there. And now Alex and I correspond quite a bit, and he's just been tight, Greg, with the tips. I had a lot of problems today as I talked about it. So Alex, I was counting on him to help me out, but what happened there?
Man, you know what? You didn't call me. I could have been in your coach's corner. I would be there for you, man. Like, I'm there. You know, just tell me when you're shooting tomorrow. I'm on top of it. I got you.
I'm just kidding with Alex. He is. He has given me pointers, and the person upstairs here just didn't take them very well. So, but Alex, we're going to see him tomorrow in the eliminations. Back to you, Greg and Teresa.
All right, thanks. So after him finishing his round, so we haven't scored everyone yet, but Alex sits in 12th place right now with a 10.9 arrow average after 60. So that is good for 654 out of 660. And Alex knows the pressure that stage can present.
Well, he absolutely does. And not only that, Greg, but Alex is another one of those archers who switched disciplines. So so many of us will remember that Alex was an Olympic hopeful several years ago. He was a really skilled recurve shooter and switched to compound. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he had a hand injury.
You're correct.
And switched, I think, 2014.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah. So he, but just an all-around nice guy, and has been a standout on the tournament circuit. Certainly, World Cup, World Championship team member. Also, you know, I think in Vegas has just done incredible things. Won Vegas, I think it was 2 years ago. Just one of the best shooters out there.
So what happened is Alex actually has another hobby, which is Frisbee. He likes to play ultimate Frisbee.
Oh, nice.
And he was giving the Frisbee a big throw, and he actually broke his finger, his middle finger. And when that healed, it was kind of in between knuckles where it broke. And when that healed, it actually created a bump. So he actually has a bump on his finger.
Interesting.
And what that was creating on his release for recurve was that he could get, say, 5 good shots, and then one would just decide to go right or left. It was like catching. And so after, you know, trying to come back from that injury is when he decided, I unfortunately, his Olympic dreams, you know, went away. But he's been very successful with the compound bow.
You know, so it's interesting, speaking of compound bows, so George a few minutes ago gave us some really great pointers about Facebook Live practice. I know you highlighted and underscored the importance of Facebook Live. And Greg, do you want any wagers now on how many Facebook Live archery presentations we're going to see in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, there goes all my views.
Yeah.
From 390 down to 6.
I
mean, I hope, you know, honestly, in a way, I hope it increases. We'll see if people can use it, and we'll see if some of the top archers decide to give it a try and try to put some of that ego aside and reap the benefits like Paul Tedford did. So.
Well, it's not an easy thing to do. You know, it's funny when I alluded earlier to, you know, just doing archery accountability with my friend Nikki, who lives in Colorado. And one of the things that we've done is shoot some video of ourselves shooting and then send it to each other and say, hey, what do you see? Because both of us are coaches, and sometimes, you know, self-coaching can be a challenging thing.
Yes. And
so even just taking that video to send to a friend, you'd be amazed at how self-conscious you become, you know?
Yeah, I know.
And that's someone who you know isn't going to judge you. And in fact, even watching video of myself shooting, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing that. So I think anything that we can do to put ourselves under a little bit of pressure really helps to prepare us for an event like this. And for sure, you know, parents out there, if you're listening and saying, well, how can I get my kid ready for an event like this? You know, their coach is the one that for sure you can initiate that conversation with. And your kid's coach should be, you know, trying to determine what is an appropriate, here's the big word, appropriate level of pressure, because the same level of pressure is not appropriate for every archer.
True, and it doesn't just apply to kids. You mentioned as a coach, you know, you want to find a piece of music, or you know that works. The kid gets irritated by, you want to play it over again, whatever. Well, the same applies for me.
Yep.
As I work with Jeff Sanchez from Bowdock Archery, who's my coach, and one of the things that I just happen to make a comment, I'm fortunate enough where I get to shoot sometimes alone at his shop. And I had on talk radio a couple weeks ago, and I noticed that my scores went down, and I said, you know, it's interesting, I listen to talk radio, and my scores go down. He goes, guess what you're going to do for the next week?
Yeah.
Every time you shoot, listen to talk radio. And I was like, but I don't want to. He goes, I don't care if you don't want to. You know, you've got to do that. And what it really translated for me, too, that I started to now become aware of was that if there is chat if people are talking behind me, I would get distracted by them. Now that I'm listening to talk radio, you know, especially if they were gossiping or something that like caught my brain, and I would, throw a 9 or something like that. So now, having listened to talk radio, I'm starting to train the brain to tune out the chatter and to really be able to focus more. And that's really what it comes down to for me. So, some of these things that we've talked about that you have really enlightened the audience with, that George and some other archers have talked about, can help archers across the board. Doesn't matter what level you're shooting at. If you're new, if you're an adult, if you're someone who decides to pick up the bow and shoot with your kid, which is another great thing that archery offers.
Well, and let's talk 1 minute, because we talked about things that you do to intentionally put yourself under a little bit of pressure to make yourself more competitive. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the other side of it, which is what do we do to make it more fun? So, you got to put a lot of arrows downrange when you want to compete. And again, we always talk about appropriate level of pressure, appropriate level of practice. So every archer's goals are not the same. Not every archer wants to go to the Olympics or the World Championships, and guess what? That's okay. It's not meant for every archer, and that's absolutely all right. So let's say that your goal is to be, the best at your local league. Maybe your goal is to just beat your own score, and you're not interested in shooting against anyone else. But you still need to practice. You still should want to practice. And the reality is, the most enthusiastic archer, just like the most enthusiastic fitness buff, still needs that little nudge now and then to get up every morning and go to the gym. So how do you make that more fun? One of the things that I talk to my students about is, bring your radio. I mean, for sure, radio is a must, right? If you listen to music at all, you should have an archery playlist that you love, something that gets you pumped up to shoot. Go for it. Mm-hmm. If it's not music, Butch and I, at our home archery range, we have a TV down there, and I will absolutely turn on some kind of mindless television that I don't care too much about, and I will watch, a little. Well, I don't know. People are going to judge me, but I watch Real Housewives while I shoot.
Oh, I'm judging you right now. I am. That's mindless?
Yeah.
I did not know.
Well, fun fact.
But it says real in the title.
Well, every time Butch sees that on, he says that I'm losing brain cells, like numerous brain cells per hour.
I get where Butch is coming from.
But all kidding aside, I mean,
no, I get
put some TV on. Butch will watch football on Sundays while he shoots. So we put a little TV on. The other thing too is, of course, you find someone to shoot with. I've been fortunate enough to, of course, I have Butch right there at home, and when he's not feeling too super serious about his practice, we'll practice together a little bit. But also, I will go, take the drive to Hall's Arrow and, plan to shoot. I've gone and popped into their league night before and shot their league, or just shot in the shop at the range where there are going to be other people around. And sometimes there's just a lot of value in shooting with other people around.
Yeah, it totally is. With Bodock Archery, for instance, he'll do once a month during indoor season, he'll have a money shoot. Mm-hmm. And it's handicapped, which is great because, for someone who shoots, say, an average, and he does it off of a 420 round.
Yep.
So for someone who shoots a higher score like me, then I'm only, I only get like 16 points. So whatever score I shoot, you add 16 points to. But if you only shot, say, a couple hundred points, you're going to get handicapped 80% of the difference between what your score is and the top score available. It's kind of difficult to explain, but basically, with that money shoot, I go in and pay the $20, and I get to shoot with like 15, 16, 17 other people. Yeah. It's a nice packed environment, and it's fun. And in the last couple of money shoots that I've done there, the person with the highest score on the target has not won yet.
Which
because
is so
of the handicap.
cool.
It's great. It gives people an opportunity, and it's great. It's great when there's a 14-year-old kid. There's a one particular Joad girl who shoots compound bow, and she won like $120. And her mom was like, "Thanks, that's going to the Lancaster Fund."
Absolutely. I mean, archery could just be, there's so many different ways to make it fun. We talk, a lot about when you're doing classes for kids. If you're thinking about how to make archery fun, there are so many great programs out there. Explore Archery, explore bow hunting, explore bow fishing. Mm-hmm. There are so many ways to keep kids engaged in this sport and keep adults engaged in the sport. I mentioned bow fishing briefly. So this is an activity that's really growing nationwide. I mean, people are so into it. There's now a national championship around bow fishing. In fact, fun fact, Erica Jones, formerly Erica Anschutz, one of our standout field and target archers. Her husband Casey is a really successful bow fisher, and in fact I believe won a national title in bow fishing last year.
Wow.
So there's a lot of prize money to be won. Bow fishing, of course, you tend to be shooting invasive species, so there's not that feeling. If you're nervous about maybe trying bow hunting for the first time, bow fishing can be a great bridge between competitive archery or recreational archery and bow hunting. And of course, bow hunting itself. I mean, it's a wonderful way to put food on the table, to know exactly where your food is coming from and how it's being handled before it gets to your table. And it's a wonderful way to get outside in the fall and the winter.
Well, taking a look at our scoring. So up until these last ends that were scored, so right now we're sitting at 45 arrows that have been scored out of 60. Jacob Pettit was clean until this last end. So Jacob Pettit now has 44 out of 45 11s, and he has 110. So the possibility of anyone qualifying a perfect score in the men's open division is now done and dusted. So now Jacob Pettit, for the line that we're on right now, is leading the way over Chance Bobeff. Sebastian Pignot is in 3rd place. Sam Woltius in 4th. Nathan Brooks, who we talked to earlier, is in 5th. Lewis Holmes, Levi Morgan, Rio Wild, Dan McCarthy, Jesse Starks, and Domagoy Budin. So fiercely competitive. The top score right now, after 45 arrows, is a 494 just for this line. Bunch of 491s, that's Bobeff and Pignot, and then some 490s, 489. So really, packed field. As for Braden Gillentine, he still sits kind of down in the order, around 15th spot with a 10.756 arrow average. That's just some notables in the men's open pro class that are currently competing on this line. If we shift our attention to the 45 arrows scored so far on the women's side of compound, Sarah Priels leads the way. Paige Gore in 2nd spot, Cassidy Cox. So if you've been following the timing and scoring, that has shifted a little bit as Cassidy Cox was up there. So Sarah Lance and Christy Collin also in the mix. Leading the way in women's open pro is Kara Kelly. We talked about her earlier. She has a 10.8 arrow average with a 648. So many classes to talk about, so many different things going on. At the top of the leaderboard, of course, for men's recurve still sits Brady Ellison. And we don't really see a challenger at this point with who's left in that field, do we?
No, I don't think so. And that looks like a pretty decent field. I mean, you've got some really solid shooters in that group. You've got, obviously Crispin, who's very close to the top right now. You've got Jack Williams and certainly Butch, and you've also in that division you've got Joe McGlynn, Matthew Requa. So there's a lot of shooters who I think are going to do some pretty good things. You're going to see, I think this weekend, especially once we get into the eliminations, Patrick Houston, I think, could be one to keep an eye on. We've got a couple of competitors there, some fierce competitors from Canada. But Joe McGlynn, I never for sure am quick to overlook, because he's a super skilled shooter. He's very accomplished World Championship team member, and never put it past him to come out and do something amazing. And then Lancaster's own Dan Schuler. Dan, of course, has been an Olympic hopeful. He is a former resident athlete at the U.S. Olympic Training Center, works here at Lancaster Archery Supply. Incredibly talented shooter, one of the nicest people you'll meet out on the field, just an all-around great guy. And Dylan McMenemy also rounding out the top 12. Dylan, of course, a collegiate shooter. He's been a standout since he was shooting as a very young kid, also out of New York City, shooting out of Joe McGlynn's shop. So there are just a lot of really skilled archers. It'll be interesting to see what develops in that men's recurve division. Also, just want to really quickly, there are so many divisions here, and we've been, to some extent, we're a little remiss in not mentioning all of them.
Yeah.
You've got youth male recurve, youth female recurve. You've got the youth compound divisions for both men and women. You've got the masters division. You've got, 50 plus and 60 plus. You've got the Barebow division. You've really got, Greg is taking a quick count right now, but I feel like we've got well over 20 different divisions going on right now, because you've got Cub Cadet and junior divisions happening. So there really are just, how many?
38 divisions.
38 divisions. I mean, so folks at home. So those are OIC. So we've actually got, so some of those are
with the youth tournament tomorrow. Right.
So there's a separate youth tournament tomorrow, but nonetheless, I mean, we have just got so many different classes competing right here today.
Yeah.
So it's a whole lot. So please don't be too upset with us if we haven't, mentioned your archer. It is not an intentional slight at all. It's just that literally, folks, we have got almost 1,500 people here competing, and it is absolutely amazing, and wish you were all here with us. I hope you're going to be here with us next year, and if you're not here with us this weekend, I hope you're going to stay tuned in with your snacks. Don't leave your couch.
Don't
Just
leave
stay
that
right
couch.
where you are and keep watching archery all weekend with us.
In the Masters Open Pro, so there's a Masters Open 50-plus division. Tony Harris leads the way with a 637. Adam Carlisle's in second place. Loxley Hutchins. So that's the Open 50. There's the Women's Open class we talked about. Katie Roth and Valerie Atten. Brenda Bond, top 3 in that class so far, with scoring still going on. In the class that I competed in earlier today, which is the largest class, which is Men Open. That's really more or less, you could kind of look at it as an amateur class. The total number of competitors just for that class, as I keep scrolling through here, 347.
Yeah.
Just in that one class.
Which is pretty amazing. I mean, the participation here is just absolutely outstanding, and we're so happy to see some kids. Right now we get and I hate to use the word kids, but for sure we get some young people here in the shot. We're just seeing so many different archers here this weekend, and it's just wonderful to see the increased participation in the youth divisions. We're seeing so many new faces this year, which is absolutely wonderful. And I think the more new faces that we continue to see, the better that archery gets, because as people try the sport and start to love it, the reality is they tell their friends about it, they bring new people into the sport, and that's how we grow. So, remember, if you're hearing this right now and you are loving archery, you're having a great experience this weekend, please take somebody shooting. Consider bringing your friend out to the range next week, get him up to your local pro shop, and get him trying archery on a rental bow, and see if you can get them hooked too.
Roger Willett, middle part of your screen right now, third in his division, which is the Masters Open Pro 50+. Dwayne Price leads the way. He shot a 653. Scott Starnes, who I have it under good authority, he and Dee are listening in on our broadcast right now, sits in second place. Michael Braden, 648, so they're actually tied. So right now, Willett is floating around third best for this particular line. Benton Christensen is leading the way after having 45 arrows scored.
And let's talk about Benton really quickly, because we saw him in the finals last year. So it's going to be very interesting to see what's going on with that Masters division this year. But he was a pretty fierce competitor last year in those finals.
And that's the one thing, as you have coverage here, and Teresa mentioned it, take an opportunity to watch all the coverage we have from the 2018 Lancaster Archery Classic, as I try to be as local as I possibly can. You got to say it locally. Even though the rest of the world's going to say, well, Lancaster. I guess there's British too, right? But as our coverage continues throughout the rest of the weekend, one of the things that's really phenomenal about this particular tournament is when you get to the shoot-ups and you have the Senior Open, Women's Open, Masters Open, you get the Bowhunter, you get the Barebow, then you get that focus. You get that 100% focus. There's no one else around shooting, and you really get to see some close-up shots. The TV crew here doing a fantastic job of bringing you the coverage. And when we get to the shoot-ups, you're really going to get to see the difference between what a barebow is, what the compound, and that's one of the things I loved about watching the coverage last year.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I mean, I fully agree with you. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about the differences in the shot process, what that looks like, what does it look like to shoot compound, what does it look like to shoot recurve and barebow. And if you're at home and you're watching and you're a little newer to archery, or let's say that you've started archery and you're not sure what kind of archery you want to continue to do, I would really encourage and invite you to try a different style of shooting. So if you started out with barebow and you're a little nervous about compound, hey, give it a shot. Like, no pun intended. I'm so punny today, Greg. But seriously, I would really consider trying a different kind of archery, because there's just nothing else like it. So if you've never shot, a recurve bow before, try a little time behind the clicker and see what happens.
Try a little time behind the clicker.
Yeah,
so
try a little time with the struggle stick and see how you like it.
Yeah. It's good. You can go to your local shop, and most of the shops are going to have those what we call beginner bows. The Samick recurves that are bare, or the Genesis compound bow, but something to get you started. And keep in mind, we're shooting at 18 meters. If you go to a shop and you're watching us for the first time, say, I want to give give archery a try. Don't expect to shoot at this range. Usually you're going to start you off maybe 5 or 10 yards away, just so you start hitting the target. And then as you get more comfortable with it and you get more, more accurate or whatever, they'll move the target back for you. So don't think you're going to be under any pressure to start archery at this distance or expected to shoot these kinds of scores.
Heck no, and not even with a target. So, the reality is you may just shoot what we call a blank bail, right? Which is just a blank foam target, or you might shoot balloons or some other kind of cool novelty target. They have, targets with cards and different games on them, and so you give that a try, and if you like that, then little by little you can move that target further and further back. Also, 3D targets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can be shooting at a dinosaur, you can be shooting at a snake or a lizard or whatever they've got.
A
dartboard.
Yeah, I
absolutely.
love that one. That's another game. If you get dartboard targets, and you can have those fun games with your friends at your local range. There's so many different ways to keep archery entertaining. And speaking of entertaining, we're at the Lancaster Archery Classic, and depending on where you're watching us, you want to make sure that you check us out on Facebook. It's at Lancaster Archery, and of course on YouTube it's Lancaster Archery, and on the Instagram it's at Lancaster Archery.
Yep.
And on Twitter it's at LANCARC. So basically it's like Lang Archery.
Yes, LANC Archery.
Exactly. And don't forget, we're on Snapchat as well. It's las.snaps. So you can check out all of our social media. Join us there and make sure you follow all the great things that Lancaster Archery has to offer during the rest of the year.
Yeah, and if you're watching the live coverage from the area here, remember that the Snapchat geo-filter is working, especially if you're here in the True Ball Excel Archery Hall. So check us out on Snapchat for sure and be part of that story.
So scoring continues as we are getting close to wrapping this up, this third line, as we call it. We had an 8 a.m. line, a noon line, and a 4 p.m. line, as we are wrapping up the final ends of this one, so we can really sort out who's going to be on top. And a lot of eyes, even for a lot of these archers that are shooting, say, the open, or the men's open class, a lot of eyes are going to be focused on those pro classes. It has the most amount of payouts. You have the biggest names in archery, that are here shooting both on the recurve and the compound side. It's a great opportunity. If you see someone like a Stefan Hansen, #1 archer in the world from World Archery Rankings for compound, and you see him, he is such an approachable person.
Oh, absolutely. He's the sweetest guy.
And he loves
Super
talking
nice.
archery. He does. He loves talking archery. And Mikey Schlosser and Steve Anderson is one of the top archers in the world. He actually works for Easton Arrows. So he is, when he's not shooting, he's hanging out in the Easton booth, the poor guy.
There is absolutely no need to be afraid of the pros. And, you know, it's funny. I will tell you guys a funny story. So when I first started shooting recurve, I would watch a lot of video of the best archers out there. And one of the archers I really watched and admired a lot was Kachuna Lorig, of course, a U.S. Olympic team member and Olympic medalist. And so I went to my first big tournament, which was the Gold Cup, which is no longer a national event, but used to be a national team qualifier. It was my first national event. And so I show up at the Gold Cup, and I went with a couple of my JOAD kids, and I get up to the practice line, and I turn and look, and there next to me is Katuna Lorig. And I blew my first 2 arrows right off the target at 70 meters. I was like, oh my goodness, I am not fit to breathe the same air as my archery idol. And I was fangirling pretty hard at that point. So I mean, but in all honesty, I've heard reactions like that from lots of people about different archers, that they see, you know, Brady, or they see Roger Willett, or they see Paige Gore, or any of the folks out here, and they get super anxious around them. And I'm here to tell you, and Greg, I'm sure you'll agree with me, everybody is so approachable. Yeah. Everybody is super kind. The most superstar archers, I mean, Kibo Bay, right? Olympic champion, world champion, just an incredible archer from Korea. If you're not familiar with her, you know, certainly one of the most accomplished archers in recent Korean medaling history. I went up to her at the 2015 World Championships, where I was working in Denmark, and asked her for a picture, and she was so happy and willing to stand there for a picture. She must have posed for pictures with like 40 of us, and just endless patience. So don't be afraid to approach your favorite archer. The Lancaster Archery Classic gives you a really unique opportunity to engage with the pros, to meet the best archers out there, and ask them your questions about their equipment, about their sponsors, about, you know, a tip for a struggle that you're having. I think go for it, and don't be afraid to ask for that autograph or ask for a minute of someone's time.
All right, I'm going to tell you a little story about myself, and I hate to tell this story, but I have to.
Do it.
So I start shooting in 2015, and I go gung-ho. So I usually, you know, work weekends in the summertime, so I don't have a lot of time to shoot. But I start shooting in 15, and the Texas Shootout comes along. And there's something called the USAT. I didn't even know what that was. I know what it is now. USA team qualifier. And it's at 50 meters. I don't even know what that means, but I go shoot it anyway. So because that particular tournament at that time was at the end of the year and so on and so forth, I end up making the cut into eliminations. And I end up in the I went through the first round, and I was lucky enough to advance. I shot with a great guy, Jerry Shields.
Yes, Joey's the best.
Who's an Olympic, he's a medalist, a world champion, Paralympic. And I got by him, excuse me. And then the next person I had to shoot against was this dude named Logan Wild.
Yeah.
And I knew Logan, even though I had been in the sport now a little while. I knew the Logan name. Rio's such a big person. He had done some videos online as I was looking for information. And I remember standing at the line next to him, not in practice. They come over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for your first scoring end. And I drew that bow back, and I could not stop shaking. And I wasn't thinking about anything. I was like, I'm shooting next to Logan Wild, okay? So I chucked an 8, and that was kind of the end of that. He ended up eliminating me, and that was all great. Well, then I get to know him because he's such an approachable guy, and he was giving me so much advice walking back and forth because he knew I was struggling a little bit, and he was such a friendly person. And then fast forward now, I didn't get to shoot any USATs in 2016. Fast forward to 2017 Arizona Cup. Get into elimination rounds again, and who do I go up against? Logan Wild.
Nice.
But it's windy, and it's such a different time now because I know him and he's disarming, and all I want to do now is crush the guy. You know, and we're friendly and we're joking around, and the wind is blowing, and he throws like a 6, and I got the guy on the ropes, and then the wind died, and he absolutely slaughtered me twice. My first 2 USAT tournaments, Logan Wild knocked me out. So then he's my white whale. That's it. He's my white whale. That's what I called him for a long time until my next USAT, and I didn't have to run into him in eliminations.
Have you told him he's your white whale?
Oh, of course. That's the greatest thing. We joke about it. You know, we're standing on line with him the first time. I'm nervous. It's Logan Wild now. You know, we text and, you know, we have fun, and he's just a good guy. You know, just a good guy. And the family's great. A lot of fun to be with and stuff. And so every now and then, because I told him, oh, you're my white whale, you keep knocking me out. So every now and then he'll be like, hey man, I hope to see you in eliminations. You know, he'll rib me a little bit. But it's quite fun.
But that's the beauty of this sport. You know, it's a great story, and it's really just speaks to the fact that, you know, archery is growing. There's no question, and recreational and tournament archery in particular are really growing. But the reality is our sport is still small enough that it's a small town sport. You know, we are still,
good way to put it.
We all still know one another. You know, many of us are connected on Facebook. Many of us have not even met personally, and we're connected on Facebook because we have so many mutual friends and we get to know each other that way. You know, I had made a friend, she lives in the Netherlands, and had never met her in person, and I think it took us 4 years to meet in person. We finally met at the World Championships.
Incredible.
And I've had many friendships like that in archery, and I can't think of any other sport, you know, where you literally make friends from all over the world, especially if you are working or competing in the sport. You know, working as I do, you get to a lot of the different events, you meet people from all over the world, and it's the nicest thing.
It is. I call them one bale friends.
Yeah.
So for instance, last week I was in Nîmes and I shot, and I was on the bale with, you know, 3 people that I've never met before. One of them from Ireland, one of them from Germany, another one from Spain. We're all now connected on Facebook, and if I ever go shoot in Spain, or if I ever go shoot in Germany, or if I ever go to shoot in Ireland, I'm dialed in just as much as they are if they come to shoot with, you know, come to the States and they need a place to shoot. And that's something that'll last forever.
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful point too, is that the hospitality in the sport is incredible. I mean, you will see archers say, you know, hey, I'm headed to Canada for a week. Does anyone know of a place to shoot? And immediately you've got, you know, a group of Canadian archers saying, hey, we've got you, you know, come on up and let us show you around while we're at it. And, you know, for the folks at home, if you're listening to this and you're rolling your eyes a little bit and saying, well, I can't just go compete in France. I mean, granted, we all understand and agree. And if you have the means and you choose to make that a priority, know that that is something that's within your reach. So this tournament, Nîmes, you know, many of the other tournaments we talk about, they're not closed events. If you are a newer archer and you have the means and the desire to go and compete there, go do it. Enjoy a competition in France. Go try a competition in another country. Make friends from all over the world. Try some different cuisine. As Mr. Greg Summers and his wife Margaret were telling me yesterday, you know, the owner of True Ball, Excel, he was saying that, you know, he started taking some time after each tournament to do a little sightseeing. And just, you know, archery has presented my husband and I, you know, through my work and through his you know, competition as a U.S. team member and an Olympic team member, has afforded us the opportunity to see some places that I could never afford to see, could never have dreamed of seeing by working in the sport. So I would, you know, definitely encourage anybody out there who's watching this and saying, well, this is a national competition, this is too fancy for me. Folks, let me absolutely discourage that notion, because I promise you there are people here who are in their first year of competing, who have just maybe shot at a couple local leagues. I have heard about people here this weekend who are shooting their first tournament here this weekend, have never shot a tournament, have just been going to the shop and shooting, and they're brand new. We had a girl last year who made it all the way into the finals, who was in her first year of competing. This was her first national level competition, Alicia North, and here she is way up there in the women's division this weekend. So what I'm telling you is, if you are new to the sport and you're watching this broadcast and you're like, well, that's too fancy, these are all top level shooters. No, they're not. I mean, we've got 1,500 shooters here, and we do not want to downplay the incredible caliber of world-class competition happening at this event this weekend, but the reality is we've also got tons and tons and tons of regular folks like myself who are just average shooters. Greg is pointing to himself too. We're just average shooters, and then some real beginners, and the vast majority of folks are here to have a wonderful time and watch those pros.
And I think to add on to that, Teresa, the one thing that's interesting if you do a local tournament or 2 or 10 or 20 is the procedures are basically the same. The sportsmanship is the same. So you can actually gain a comfort level of shooting on the line with other shooters and learning how the process works. Meaning, say for instance, you know, if you're done shooting and you have a shooter that's right in front of you or directly behind you that's at full draw, the courtesy thing is to stand on the line. You've seen it here in the videos. You'll see it coming up here when the first shooter gets done. If the shooters closest to you are not at full draw, then you can step off the line. But if they're at full draw, you don't want to distract them, create any movement, the courtesy, you know, thing to do. It's those little things, standing on the line, straddling the line. You know, how do you approach that? How do you, in tight quarters, get your arrow out of your quiver, knock up your arrow, and go to full draw? All those things are the same. at the local level. You know, and especially if you shoot, say, a USA Archery tournament, you can have a local USA Archery tournament and it's run with the same rules that a USAT's going to be run with, or you know, a World Archery tournament. And that includes even your dress code. So some places like USA Archery require a bit of a dress code versus some of the other organizations, and those are, you know, things to know. You know, no jeans at that level, say, a collared shirt type of thing, you know, no camo on the bow type of thing, but not here. You know, here is more open. So, but the fundamentals of it, as we look at Levi Morgan go at full draw, which, by the way, I just think he has got one of the most natural full, like, draw, anchor points, and holds that I've ever seen.
Yeah, his shot is very textbook perfect, and he's just a very, very skilled shooter. I mean, he puts in the time, he devotes his life to it, his wife devotes her life to it, and you can truly see that. You know, Levi, of course, you know, with, you know, on television as well, promoting bow hunting. Just wonderful folks, a wonderful family. You know, one of the things you mentioned is about knowing the rules and format of the tournament that you're going to, and that's a great coaching point that we always, you know, encourage folks to remember as they are going out, especially if you're just learning how to compete, if you're just getting started. Every good tournament is, every tournament period, but especially a tournament like this one, is going to make the effort to put out their rules and format. The folks here at Lancaster Archery Supply did a beautiful video prior to this year's tournament and last year's tournament that tells you as a shooter. It's funny, you know, I was in my office the other day, I work from home, and I kept hearing voices that I recognized from Lancaster. I was hearing Heather File, who works here. She's a standout coach and a wonderful all-around person. And I'm like, why do I keep hearing Heather's voice? Well, my husband, who's shooting the tournament, played the video like 3 times and took notes to make sure that he knew all the rules of the tournament. And guys, this is a 5-time Olympian that we're talking about, a 37-time national champion. So he did not assume he knew those rules.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. There's a good look at a young shooter.
And beautiful. I mean, it's funny, we just looked at Levi Morgan shooting, and his form, this young fellow's form, really mirrored Levi's. I mean, it's pretty outstanding.
You can see the process. It's something that coaches often talk about. What is your process? When you watch this shooter go to anchor, you see the rest, elevate the arrow. Now watch the release.
So he's pulling with his back. He's just, now watch that elbow come back, nice and strong. Beautiful, great follow through.
So the first thing he did, he clicked his rest, his fall away rest. And the way that he loads the arrow, he'll knock it up, watch him touch so he touches the
peep to make sure that nothing's rotating around there.
The D loop and then the peep. That's part of, you know, that structured process, that if you're aware of your process, once you're aware of it, it's a good way to be able to make changes if there's a hitch in the process or something you need to add or take out.
Now look how consistent this young man is. Very similar shot to shot. He's got a look that almost looked like a little bit of stress that was relieved there. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that you mentioned, Greg, a minute ago, and you mentioned a fall away rest, and I think it's important to highlight for the folks at home. So, you know, when we're talking about rest, we're talking about the piece of equipment that the arrow literally rests on. And you can see that right on the bow there. What the arrow is actually sitting on, it's not sitting on the shelf of the bow or the riser of the bow. It's sitting on a mechanical piece called an arrow rest, and that can be as simple as a piece of wire or a piece of clear plastic, and it can be as complicated as something that is hooked to a cord and drops out from under the arrow as the arrow is released from the bow. And then everything in between. We've got blades, we've got prongs, we've got so many different, we've got containment rests that contain the arrow in what looks like plastic whiskers. I mean, there are so many different ways to keep an arrow on a bow, and that's just one of the many pieces of equipment that we'll be highlighting throughout our commentary this weekend that helps you folks at home to understand just the vast amount of archery equipment that's available to you, some wonderful options, you know, available through our event sponsors here. We've got so many of them, and so we just really want to call attention here, of course, to the True Ball XL Archery Hall. Our live video production that we're here, that you're seeing right now, is sponsored by Hoyt Archery. We've got Dead Center Archery products for the live scoring, and it's the Carbon Express Practice Hall. Victory Archery is sponsoring a youth trophy tournament. Our Platinum Plus sponsors, Matthews Archery, Carbon Express, Black Eagle Arrows. Our Platinum sponsors, Carter Enterprises, SKB, Shrewd, Big Shot, BCY, Loophole, Doinker, Stan, Specialty archery products, Scott Archery, CBE, which is custom bow equipment, Easton Arrows, Limb Saver. We've got Last Chance Archery, American Eagle. We have one there that I'm going to come back to, which I can't quite read, but I promise I'll get back to it. Gateway Feathers, Elite Archery, Bloodsport, Bee Stinger. We've got Prime, Yeti, Gold Tip, Vortex, Bowtech, Rogue Bowstrings, Gas Bowstrings, Victory Archery Products, PSE Archery, Win and Win, Wheelus, Shibuya, Biter, Top Hat, Cartel. Gold sponsors, we've got Competition Archery Products, Zebros Archery, Brownell and Gillow Gold Medal, and I will come back to you in just a moment with the name of those two other logos that unfortunately my eyesight was not equal to right now.
Yeah, we're looking at a pretty small piece of paper. But scoring continues. It should be the penultimate end. Should be arrows 50 up to 57 scored on this one. So as scoring completes, I don't know if you guys talked about this, but this is one of the interesting things that I absolutely loved about this tournament. It doesn't matter what class you're in, it doesn't matter your age. The final arrow that you shoot in qualification, the closest to the center per class gets a $100 gift card to Lancaster Archery. So I had the closest to the center on my bail, but it was a half shaft 11, so it wasn't even worth. So if you shoot an inside out 11 or inside out X on this target face, you're going to be eligible to win a gift card from Lancaster Archery, which is phenomenal because you can go to lancasterarchery.com and you can use those gift cards at any time. Just simply get to your cart, order what you want, and they have great deals on shipping constantly, and they have things on sale, and it's just, I mean, when I first started getting into archery, that was my spot. You know, I'd go late night, fill up a shopping cart, and just dream.
Oh my goodness, and speaking of shopping at Lancaster Archery Supply, that was a perfect segue. I want to apologize to Neat Archery Products, whose logo I couldn't quite see because it was in very small print, and No Limit Archery. So a little extra love to you guys right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being platinum sponsors of the Lancaster Archery Classic here. And again, to all of our sponsors whose names we just mentioned a few moments ago, we are so grateful for your support of this tournament. We keep hearing such great things from the folks at home. Please keep your comments coming on social media. Keep engaging with us. We are so excited that you've been here watching with us all day, but we really hope you're going to come back tomorrow morning starting at 8 a.m. for our eliminations coverage. We go right into the finals, and then the final shoot down on Sunday. It is going to be an amazing weekend of archery, and we're super glad that you're with us.
And I appreciate you having me sit in this booth with you, Teresa, for the time being. The reason, because Chuck Cooley, who's anchoring this coverage with you for the remainder of the weekend, is out shooting right now, and he's got 57 arrows in the books. And Chuck doing quite well today. He's averaging 10.4,
nice.
74 points per arrow. So Chuck Cooley in the mix. And Chuck, of course, not scared, as he is in the men's Open Pro division, the division of which I did not shoot in.
That's a tough division. I mean,
121 people showed up to shoot that one.
Stepping up into a pro division is a tough commitment to make. It's an exciting commitment to make, and sometimes archers also do that just to commit themselves to a goal and give themselves something to look forward to. You know, different things motivate different archers, and for sure we talk about this a lot in coaching. You know, what keeps your archer motivated? Sometimes, and this is something we explain a lot to parents, because parents say, well, does she have a chance of winning that tournament? Well, sometimes, no offense, that doesn't really matter. That's not the point. Sometimes the point is just to get experience, because you typically cannot win a competition or even come close to doing that until you've experienced the competition, understand the flow of the event, and feel comfortable enough there to go beyond your personal best, and that doesn't happen without experience. So we often talk about a learning year. We talk about time when archers are just out there getting experience and learning how to compete at the highest level before they even have a chance of of being at the top of their division nationally.
It's part of the reason why I like to shoot, why I went to Nîmes for the World Archery Indoor. Like you mentioned, for World Archery Indoor, it's open to anyone. Anyone can sign up, anyone can go to those events. Of course, when the outdoor starts, as they're directly in line with the Olympic Committee, those are representatives from the top people from their country.
Yes.
But so outdoor is kind of off limits unless you're one of the top 4 in the United States or on the waiting list if someone decides not to go or is sick or something like that.
For the World Cups.
For the World Cups, yes. So anyway, my point is that even the USA team qualifiers, the USAT tournaments, you get lumped in with the pros. And so that experience is so valuable for someone like me where, you know, in a division like Open Pro, or if you want to shoot Open, say in Las Vegas, it costs more money to enter that because the prize money is a lot higher. So sometimes there's a barrier for some shooters that say, well, I don't really want to turn pro in this particular division, you know, say NFAA, because some of these tournaments are going to cost me more money. So there's other options that you have to still compete on that level and, you know, get the experience with the top shooters in the United States or in the world and still have the same, you know, have that same tournament. And that's one of the things that I personally like to do. I like to challenge myself. You know, if I get really good someday in the amateur division, who knows? I'm definitely gonna, you know, when time is right, graduate into that pro class. And the one thing I can say about shooting with pros is they're always so generous. They are focused on their program, but you know, those in-between ends or the times walking to the target, if I've ever had a question for a pro, if I felt the time was appropriate to ask, I would ask, and everyone's always been generous with their experience and their knowledge, always, and that's
Absolutely.
a great thing.
Yeah, and you know, so you alluded a little bit to some of the different tournament formats that are available out there, and so, you know, USA Archery events are typically open events, meaning that anybody can go and shoot them. They don't divide by pro and amateur. So if you are a brand new shooter or you are a veteran shooter or anywhere in between, you can go and compete alongside the best archers in the country, and some of those are also the best in the world. ASA and NFAA have pro divisions, and so you declare yourself as a pro. That means you're eligible for increased prize money and other you know, winnings, but it also means that you're going to shoot in a group against other pros. So you can pay your money and enter as a pro. There's no score requirement that tells you you're not good enough to go. You can be a new archer and register as a pro. You just have to know that to be willing to pay that financial due, literally to enter that class. But archery is by and large a sport that's very open to folks. So, you know, unlike a sport, you know, like swimming, for example, where you have, you know, many competitions that are closed competitions, or even archery in other countries where, you know, there's not really a sense of recreational archery competition. Here in the U.S., we're very blessed and fortunate that anybody can enter almost any competition here in the U.S. Without being qualified in, with very few exceptions.
So we are in our final arrows of the day here at the 2018 Lancaster Archery Classic. And this will set the stage once the scores are in the books for who will make their respective classes, eliminations for tomorrow, and then come back and start that process in order to get to the final group of people that are going to be competing in the shoot-up competitions.
Absolutely. And so if you're, you know, watching at home, or you're just heading out of the hall and you've been hanging out here and you're listening to our live broadcast, I would really encourage you to go back and check out the scores tonight so that you can see what you're going to be watching tomorrow.
Yep.
Especially if you're competing tomorrow. So check out archers.com, which is RCHERZ.com. And you can see all the results from today, as well as I believe you should be able to see some of the brackets for tomorrow. I don't want to promise that, but hopefully bracket information will be available to you. And we are just super excited for everything that comes tomorrow. Of course, my partner in crime, Chuck Cooley, we'll have to see if he made the cut or not. We've been hopeful for him. We'll see. And if Chuck makes the cut, then hopefully he'll move right through it.
All right, and maybe I'll be back. All right, so just to give you an idea, all the times we're talking about are Eastern Standard Time. So the shoot-up finals with live commentary will start tomorrow with the Senior Open Division at 1 p.m. At 1:40 will be the Women's Open. And then at 2:20 will be the Masters Open. Bowhunter, Barebow, Youth Female Open, Youth Female Recurve, and Youth Male Recurve will all follow. And that final will start at 5:40. So a big applause. And PJ, I can see you're down there. What's up, man?
Yes, absolutely. So you just heard the cheer, the applause. We just finished out here the final end, the final arrow of the final qualification line. So now we know whatever the scores are, we got our folks set for tomorrow's elimination matches. 8 a.m. they're going to start. They'll be finished at noon. Shoot-up finals will start for some divisions at 1 p.m. And then Sunday, we've got more finals starting at 8 a.m. One thing we want to mention, Greg and Teresa, is we're going to have a Meet the Pros event from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's anybody who's out there can come on down, meet some of the best archers in the business. Paige Gore, Levi Morgan, Jesse Broadwater, on and on and on. We've got them come down, get pictures, shake hands, and while you're here, you can see some great archery too, because those final matches on the final stage are unreal.
Yep, and to add to that, PJ, on Sunday when you're talking about those shoot-up finals, they'll start at 8 a.m. like you mentioned. That's going to be Masters Open Pro, followed by Women's Recurve, Men's Recurve. Then we're going to have the Youth Male Open, the Men's Open, and then the Compound Women's Open Pro, followed finally at 12:55 p.m. by Men's Open Pro. So if you're in California time, set the alarm clock early because there's a lot of archery to be had right here from the 2018 Lancaster Archery Classic.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, PJ, for taking us through tomorrow's programming, and thank you so much, Greg, for joining me here. We're super excited to see you again. Hopefully you'll be joining us tomorrow. Hopefully that means that Chuck will be shooting. Because
I know I didn't make my elimination.
And if he's not shooting, hopefully we'll see you pop in to cover us here and there. We'd love to see you again, and thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to all the folks at home. Thank you so much to our 2018 sponsors. Thank you for everybody for joining us here live from the Spooky Nook Sports Complex, the True Ball Excel Archery Hall. Thank you so much to Hoyt Archery again for sponsoring this live video, live scoring from Dead Center Archery Products, and the practice hall from Carbon Express. We appreciate all of you, and we will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, bright and early, for eliminations coverage from the Lancaster Archery Classic.
Archers, if it may have your attention, please. Archers, we have make-up arrows. Once you have completed scoring, please return back behind the red line. Thank you. Archers, once again, once you have completed scoring, please take both the paper and the electronic scoring tablets back to the turn-in areas. Please clear the field once you have completed scoring. We have makeup arrows.
Okay, then how about just this near one here? Yeah, you don't think it's green? Built up, up. Yeah, that's nice.
Alistair Whittingham, target 48, wins $100 gift card closest to the middle, best one all day.
Archers, please remove your arrows at this time and return behind the red line. We have makeup arrows. Archers, once again, please return behind the red line. We have makeup arrows.